Number 10. Grim Knight. The origin story of the Grim Knight is similar to the Batman of Prime Earth, but is warped. Instead of the Dark Knight, we know him as the Grim Knight, because this Batman is not afraid to use guns. So yes, you could say he's similar to the OG Batman from the 40s, but he is also far more brutal and ruthless. This version of Batman ended up killing Joe Chill when he was just a child. After Chill shot his parents, he stumbled away in the darkness, but Chill tripped and dropped his gun and Martha Wayne's necklace. While he searched for the necklace in the dark, a young Bruce grabbed the gun and aimed it at Chill, killing him in cold blood with tears in his eyes. This set Bruce down the path of believing that killing was the best way to deal with criminals that opposed justice. This version of Bruce was still inspired by a bat crashing through his window to become Batman, but he also shot that bat when it did. Number 9. Death of Superman. After Superman dies at the hands of Doomsday, Lois becomes depressed and jaded, believing that the world failed Clark. She ends up merging with the Eradicator, who claims it failed in its mission to resurrect the fallen Superman, and instead bonds with Lois so that she can succeed where she believes other heroes have failed, fighting on in Clark's name. However, Lois goes too far compared to Superman, killing those who oppose her, villains and heroes alike. Superman returns, but only lives long enough to express his disappointment and disgust in what Lois Lane has become before he is killed by Cyborg Superman. Super depressing story. Number 8. The Merciless. Like the Earth-12 belonging to the non-dark multiverse, on Earth-12, Batman and Wonder Woman are also in a romantic relationship together. They fight side by side in a war that threatens to engulf the entire population of Earth against the god of war, Ares. After countless have died and they're basically the only two left standing, they finally succeed, but Batman feels in order to protect the world, he should be the one to wield Ares' power. Knowing that Wonder Woman herself would not take Ares' helmet, and with it his power, and that she would actually not allow Bruce to take it for fear of it corrupting him, Batman sees no other choice but to kill Diana. He takes Ares' helmet for himself and fights on, claiming to fight in honor and in memory of the fallen warrior and his love, Wonder Woman. Number 7. Blackest Night. This is a wild story wherein Sinestro never shared the powers of the White Lantern. Here, Necron, who speaks through Darkseid, attempts to obliterate the entire universe. Sinestro is both Black and White Lantern, known as the Limbo Lantern, and sees only one way to save the universe, by creating a new universe in Dove's image, by plugging her into the source. This almost works, except at the last minute their ally, Mr. Miracle's conviction wavers, and he ends up killing Dove to avoid creating and living in a world without his wife Barda. Instead, Sinestro is forced to use the only teammate he has left, Lobo, to create a new universe. Yeah. Slim pickings, I guess. The world instead is made in Lobo's image, who taps into the source, eliminating all Black Lanterns and restarting a dark and more grotesque looking world, which Sinestro remains trapped in, unable to leave due to Tempest preventing him from doing so. That sucks. Number 6. The Devastator. The Devastator is another twisted version of Bruce Wayne who was pushed too far. For mysterious reasons that remain unknown, the Superman of the Devastator's dark universe randomly underwent a change that caused him to go on a full-out rampage, killing everyone. Batman was one of the last few left to try and stop him, attempting to do so with a kryptonite spear. After Superman blasts off Batman's arm, however, he is driven to desperate measures. Batman is forced to activate his own version of the Doomsday virus, which takes over his body and transforms him into a Doomsday-like creature, becoming the Devastator. Although he fails in saving his world, he succeeds in killing the Superman of his universe, before heading out to try and save other alternate Earths by infecting them with the virus in order to protect them from their world Superman. Although, you know, they never really asked for that, so it's pretty horrifying.
Number 5. Etrigan, or Etrigan, or Etrigon, or Etrigan. He could be considered really cool or really weird, honestly. Etrigan rocketed to an Earth of eternal twilight from the doomed planet of Camelot. Who does that sound like? Maybe another hero who rocketed to Earth from another planet that starts with a K? They sound similar because Etrigan is an alternate version of Superman with quote-unquote overnatural abilities. From Earth 13, a planet of the supernatural and occult. Etrigan fights evil in Merlin's name alongside the League of Shadows as the Super Demon. Together, the League of Shadows faced off against an invasion of super vampires. powers. And later, Etrigan became part of the Supermen of the multiverse, targeted by prophecy, and allies with them to come up with a plan to free the other alternate Supermen. A demon Superman is weird, but he won't be the weirdest alternate Superman to hit this list. Number 4, Yankee Poodle. I think I could effectively choose any one of the characters from the animal universe of Earthsea for this point, but of all the characters a part of the zoo crew, Ali Cadabra, Captain Carrot, Little Cheese, none really make me say, what? Quite like Yankee Poodle. Gossip journalist Rova Barkett, an anthropomorphic poodle, see what I did there? Would moonlight as Yankee Poodle, a superhero with the powers of magnetic manipulation that for some reason allowed her to shoot semi-solidified electromagnetic blue-colored stars with her right hand, push things away, and generate red and white stripes with her left hand in order to bring things to her. I don't know. If she put these powers together though, she can generate highly destructive magnoblasts. But for me, the best use of her power is she could travel by forming a ramp of stripes in front of her while propelling herself along it by shooting stars behind her. No, I didn't make any of that up. Just so we're clear on that. Number 3, Robert Rogers. This one has got a fun little twist. So, back in 2002, DC teamed up with Stan Lee of Marvel Comics fame, and together they released the Just Imagine series, which is basically, why don't we let Stan Lee come and make a bunch of characters with the ideas of DC characters? It is actually honestly a great idea. One of those characters ended up being Robert Rogers from Just Imagine Shazam #1. And yes, he is Stan Lee's Shazam. When I tell you he is absolutely nothing like the regular Shazam, I ain't kidding. I mean, other than saying Shazam to activate his powers. For starters, he is not a kid. He is actually an agent with Interpol, and he is assigned to the tough agent Carla Noral, who together go to India to hunt down criminal Gunga Khan. Secondly, he is empowered by the wizard Merlin to hunt down Morgana Le Fay. And finally, when he yells the word Shazam, he transforms into a giant, hairy, red-fanged creature with a necklace of bones. Gosh, I love Stan Lee. Number 2, Milkman Man. The DC Universe Wiki says that Milkman Man is an imperfect copy of Superman. Excuse me, DC Wiki? This is an improved copy of Superman. All that calcium, strongest bones you've ever seen, I bet. In JLA/Doom Patrol special, the Doom Patrol has discovered that an interdimensional corporation called Retco has been stealing stories, reconfiguring them, and repackaging them for new markets. Retco has embedded itself into the current continuity, using the radioactive milk of psychic cows to quell the more dangerous impulses of the Justice League and turn them into heroes safe for the masses. That is literally the quote from the official summary. I am not even joking. Milkman Man has all the same powers as the famous Kryptonian superhero, only he's a milkman, and central part of the Community League of Rhode Island, a sinister group of pleasant-spoken normal folks. Please just do yourself the favor of reading this story and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Number 1, KFC. Okay, it's weird enough that we have Colonel Sanders in the mainline continuity, but after his adversary Colonel Sanders takes the memory of all but the second of KFC's 11 herbs and spices from Sanders' brain, he is visited by Colonel Arla Sanders of Earth 11, who relays some information. 1. Apparently, every Colonel Sanders variant in the multiverse is close with the Flash of that universe, which is weird. Number 2, she remembers a different herb and or spice from the recipe, meaning every alternate Colonel will remember a different herb or spice, which is weirder. And number 3, with the help of her Flash and her cosmic treadmill, they're going across the multiverse to form the multiversal team of Colonel Sanders, which is the weirdest part. There's Colonel Gaslight, Colonel from Kingdom Come, the future Colonel Ladd, Bizarro Colonel, Teen Titans Colonel, Comrade Sanders, and a Wild West Sanders. But my absolute favorite, and one that should make absolutely no sense, and if you really think about it, is kind of sick and twisted, is the anthropomorphic Chicken Sanders from the post-apocalyptic Earth 51, whose second line is literally, "Bok! Appetite." What the bok?
Coming in number 10, we have another Flashpoint. This seems like the most common way that the DC universe could end. It doesn't matter how many times the speedster runs as fast as he can never run fast enough to change the world for the better. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the Flashpoint is when the Flash runs so fast he goes back in time to reset things. The most famous version of this is when he runs back in time to stop his mom from being killed when he was a kid, and comes back to the present day to find that everything has fallen out of control. battle. Bruce Wayne is dead, Thomas Wayne is Batman, Martha Wayne is the Joker, Atlantis and Themyscira are fighting over Earth in the biggest war that the world has ever seen, and Superman is a withered cower in a bunker that can barely talk. I hate to say it, but things were better the other way around, Barry. So Barry Allen has to run back in time at the end of this to reset everything so it can return to the way it was. Now we do see the Flash pull off this move again in the Justice League Dark universe, which I love. The Flash runs back through time to reset the world after the League just defeated Darkseid, because even though the heroes defeated the big baddie, half of them are dead and the other half are either insane, traumatized, or 50% robot. So will we see a Flashpoint where things go very wrong and time itself is ripped apart and everything ceases to exist? Maybe. Coming at number 9, we have Superman Goes Loco. This has been the backbone of a lot of comics. Superman is so powerful that his presence can basically be the backbone of how an entire series will play out. If he's there, the day is saved. If he's not, everyone dies. We have seen this so many times in the DC universe that I am honestly impressed by how the writers are able to find new and interesting ways to keep using Superman's unbeatable powers. But what would happen if the boy in blue lost his mind? I'm not talking about like going crazy like he does in the Injustice games, where you can kind of see his point of view, but he's still really ruthless. I'm talking about he just wants to murder. If Superman went truly insane, like homicidal rage insane, then we could see him just fly from planet to planet and start blowing them up, and who's going to stop him? It would take a very powerful team of magic users and a back catalog of kryptonite to take him out. Actually, that's a comic I would really like to read. A super magic team put together to kill an insane Superman that's flying through the space trying to kill everything? Someone get DC Comics on the phone, we got a winner. Coming at number 8, we have Just Too Old. Some of you watching are going to be huge fans of the DC animated universe, and why wouldn't you be? It's absolutely amazing. You might remember the episode where the whole league gets turned into kids, a trope that we have seen in comics again and again, along with other media. In this episode, the powerful magic user Mordred blasts out a spell that sends any adult to another world so he can be the ruler of Earth with all the other kids that he wants to be around. This means that the league is trapped in an alternate dimension with everyone that's over the age of 13. This is why the league gets turned into children, so they can come back to Earth and then fight Mordred. But if the league lost that fight, that would have been the end of the universe, as eventually everyone except for Mordred, who has been blessed with eternal youth, would have aged out and been banished away. Next on the list, we have Poison Ivy has had enough. It's no secret that Poison Ivy doesn't really have a soft spot for anything living and breathing unless it's green and has petals. She's a wook in the truest sense of the word. To her, every nature lover is just a poser. So if she got the chance, she would probably erase all non-plant life on the planet so everything could be green. What would this mean for people? Well, everyone would probably be turned into plant people, similar to her, or they would just be killed. I don't know how bad she wants company. There's a story arc called Queen Ivy, where she becomes fed up with humanity once again and decides that she is going to rebrand herself as Queen Ivy, and she sends her roots into the foundation of Gotham to tear it down. With a lot of the DC heroes not seeing Ivy as a threat currently, as she has been going through a anti-hero phase, she might be able to pull a fast one on all the soups and get the floor of paradise that she has always wanted. Next on the list, we have the Crime Syndicate returns. The Crime Syndicate has been used again and again in the DC universe, and I truly love them. I know that this is an old trope not only in comics but pretty much everywhere. I mean, we can fly back in time to evil Spock, who was repping that goatee. I think that's when the goatee became a symbol of villainy. But even though this trope is tired and old, having heroes face off against their evil counterparts is so fun, because you usually get to see how heroes would beat each other if they ever fought, and if they didn't have to hold back. And the Crime Syndicate comes with some cool variations to the Justice League, like how Superwoman has a lasso of submission, and Ultraman has to feed on kryptonite to get powers and is weakened by the sun. But when we see this team of terror rip through a wormhole in the New 52, they nearly take out the entire league by trapping them inside Firestorm, which would have caused him to explode if they weren't eventually freed. But if the Syndicate had their way, the DC universe would have been destroyed before the New 52 ever got its footing.
Number 5, Earth 14. Alright, this is gonna be a pretty quick one. There is not a whole heck of a lot of information out there about Earth 14, which first appeared in Superman Volume 4, number 15 in 2017. I want to talk about it because the Justice League of Assassins is just the coolest looking version of the Justice League I have ever seen, even if it was just for a short period of time. The Assassins are made up of alternate heavy weapon bearing versions of Wonder Woman, Batman, Harley Quinn, Flash, Aquaman, what looks like it could be Green Lantern, and Superman. They only last about 3 pages of the comic they are a part of, but I really hope we see them pop up in other stories because these guys are just so rad. All we saw them do was fight a bunch of gatherers in a post-apocalypse looking Earth. Number 4, Batman 89. Okay, you can fight me in the comments about this one. Batman 89 was published in 2021, but the stories take place in the Tim Burton Batman movies world. Seeing how we haven't actually seen a comic in this world, I'm gonna take this one, okay? Cool. So yes, this is that Batman and Bruce Wayne in this comic. He has the same suit from the movie, the same amazing Batmobile, and it takes place after the events of the movies. But it's more like comic heavy. It's really cool. We see Harvey Dent actually become Two-Face, Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman is back, and we even get a Robin for this universe. It's so awesome. I don't want to spoil too much, so you can probably guess what I'm gonna say. Go give it a read. Number 3, DC vs. Vampires. The ongoing DC vs. Vampires limited series that started in 2021 is such an amazing story. It just makes sense. Pit the characters of the DC universe against a growing army of vampires, a mystery around who the superhero vampire leader is. It's great! The basic premise, without spoiling much, is that Mary, Queen of Blood, who upholds the peace between vampires and humans, is dead. Whoever killed her also killed the Legion of Doom, and has made a plan for vampires to take over the world. Andrew Bennett, a vampire, went to the Justice League to tell them about the army of vampire supervillains. There's a vampire Gorilla Grodd, like, come on. The story has a large Batman and Bat family presence, as a story about vampires should, and for a story so grim, it actually has some really funny moments. Especially from Damian Wayne, as I'm sure no one is surprised by. Number 2, DC Bombshells. DC Comics Bombshells is an awesome story from 2015 that focuses on a reality where a team of female superheroes fight on the side of the Allies during World War II. It actually first came to be because of a line of statuettes released by DC with superheroines wearing retro 40s inspired costumes. They were so popular that they moved to variant covers and then they got their own series. Each hero has their own style and story while still all being part of this bigger, wider alternate World War II story. It's truly awesome and mainly follows Batwoman, Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Stargirl, Zatanna, and the Batgirls. Go give it a little gander, would you? Number 1, Dark Knights of Steel. And now for my favorite. Dark Knights of Steel. Swords, sorcery, superheroes. Dark Knights of Steel is a story that actually came out this year, that's 2022 if you're watching this from the future, but is set in an alternate medieval fantasy universe. Batman is an actual knight and half Kryptonian. Like, I'm just in love. Okay, so basically, Jor-El and Lara escape Krypton before it is destroyed and crash land on the medieval Earth, and eventually become the rulers of the land after giving birth to Kal-El. It's wild. There are alternate versions of Green Lantern, Supergirl, Harley Quinn, Robins, Alfred, Constantine, Green Arrow, Joker, Green Lantern, Black Lightning, and more. I love to see comic book publishers do these time-displaced stories. It's great.
Number 10, Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Batman Hush. I actually really love this story, but it's also kinda out there, especially when you consider it has its own sort of theme song and a very creepy tone. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse Hush, Bruce Wayne is the one who becomes a version of the Hush character. It would be more accurate though to say that he becomes a version of Hush and Batman if they were kinda like combined together. Here, Thomas Elliot instead becomes a rich billionaire playboy and also corrupt senator, allying himself with Talia al Ghul. He manages to make it so that Bruce was locked away in Arkham Asylum. Despite feeling slightly guilty about doing this to his childhood friend, overall Elliot is pretty okay with the way Bruce is imprisoned and treated there. However, after faking his death, Bruce Wayne manages to escape Arkham and becomes Elliot's worst nightmare. And just for a fun fact, he doesn't go by Hush in this one though, he's the Silenced. Shh. Get it? Still like Hush. Number 9, JLA the Nail. This is an Elseworld story that centers around a literal nail. The nail in question is one that punches Martha and Jonathan Kent's tire, thereby preventing them from intercepting and adopting little baby Kal-El, who would grow up to become Superman. Or at least he would have grown up to become Superman if that's what happened. In this world, instead, there is seemingly no Superman. As such, Lex Luthor is successful in making the JLA a band of outlaws. Instead of them being celebrated heroes, they're kind of considered to be somewhat criminal, despite of course their noble intentions. What I will say is at least a lot of this artwork is pretty good. Most of the limited series ends up being kinda dull, save for a few scenes and plot points. The parts that I found the most interesting were one where Selena gets therapy while sexy posing on a desk, another being a fight involving Joker with anti-grav mitts versus Batman, which takes place after Joker has successfully killed Batgirl and Robin. Batman ends up broken as a result of the Joker's actions here. We later learn that the Superman of this universe is basically a very sensitive Jimmy Olsen who is bonded with the remaining traces of Kal-El's DNA found in this crash-landed spaceship. Jimmy doesn't like it when people laugh at him. He ends up in a fight with the real Kal-El, another interesting part of the 3-issue series, who it turns out was adopted by the Amish, hence why he never became a hero, as he preferred to stay within his community. So we get an Amish Superman, and then we also get Jimmy Olsen Superman, but he's pretty much evil. Also, what is that costume he's wearing? Sorry, Jimmy, I didn't mean to laugh at you. Sorry. Alright friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more multiversal tales, let us know that you love it by giving this video a thumbs up. And also let us know in the comments what other multiversal tales you have loved or you have thought are super weird, or that you loved and thought were weird. I mean, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Number 8. Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Wonder Woman, War of the Gods. I don't even know what to really make of this multiversal story. All I can tell you is buckle in, because this dark multiverse story is, yeah, dark. To be fair to this one shot though, I don't really even know what to make of the War of the Gods story in the main continuity, which I also found a little confusing, so it makes sense that this is where I would be as well with the dark multiverse version. A little confused. In this story, the Amazons of Themyscira end up in a war with the United States. When Diana is pulled into a battle with Hecate as a result of these events, where in the main continuity Hecate was defeated by Wonder Woman's lasso of truth, here she just ends up planting a seed within Diana's mind. Diana defeats her, but only temporarily. Following the death of Hippolyta, her mother, Diana is left weak, fearful, alone, and resentful, and this is when Hecate is able to take over. Unable to free her, all of Wonder Woman's friends die trying to. The only way to contain Hecate Wonder Woman is with magic, and many of her magical colleagues actually die in the attempt to do so. Hecate as such ends up chained, but of course so is Diana, unable to find the hope to escape her own internal prison. Of course, like most dark multiversal tales, we end on a pretty dark and tragic note. But that's okay, Zatanna's never gonna give up. Number 7. JLA Act of God. Admittedly, this is a cool premise, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense, which is what's weird about it. In JLA Act of God, an Elseworlds 3-issue miniseries, we get to explore a world where all the heroes of Earth have simultaneously lost their powers. Well, at least almost all of them anyways. How did this happen? Black light? Somehow the world being hit with a flash of black light results in almost everyone losing their powers. I guess normally superheroes don't go to raves or anything, where black light is, I feel like, very common. Although this is attributed to the black light, some might call it an act of God. A later on, very suddenly, devoutly Christian Diana Prince at least would probably claim that. Diana, haven't you met gods? How does that make sense? What's really ridiculous is in the first issue, as we go through the moment this happened, the world over, we get to see just how diverse not only everyone's powers are, but also when it comes to the source of their powers, just how diverse it is. In one page we go from Steel losing complete control of his systems and suit as he plummets to his doom, to Aquaman losing his ability to connect with the creatures of the sea telepathically and his ability to breathe underwater. At the same time, Kyle Rayner also has lost control of his Green Lantern ring, which seems to now just be, I guess, a really unique and trendy looking accessory. How could a flash of black light affect almost everyone in this same way? Like I said, it's a cool premise, kinda wonky execution though. How is Steel affected by this? Didn't Steel make his suit? I'm confused. Number 6. Facets. What happens when we get to see the Teen Titans as they be in a fantasy setting? Well, a whole lot of weirdness. Raven of course ends up evil, known as a deadly and beautiful sorceress, Queen Raven. She creates her own loyal servant and accomplice with Victor Stone, or at least she tries to, transforming him permanently into a cyborg. It turns out this isn't all that Raven's been up to though. She has a whole collection of prisoners whom she has transformed in some way, and when Cyborg refuses to join her, she also contemplates holding him there with the rest of them. Canada. So apparently she does this a lot. Seems like her deals with people don't usually work out. I guess she's just hoping that one day that'll change. She's like, I'll just keep doing it. Eventually someone will be loyal to me. If I try it enough times, it's gotta work. In this story, Coriander is a prisoner of some goblin mages who use cosmic energy to transform her into Starfire. The comic features an all-out battle between Raven and Starfire, joined of course by the rest of the Titans. Nightwing goes on a trip inside Phantasm's cloak, literally looks like he's tripping out, and eventually Trigon joins the party when he is summoned by his daughter Raven. You can check it all out in the 1994 New Titans Annual. It's weird. It's definitely weird. Also, some of these outfits are interesting.
Number 5. The Linear Verse. The Linear Verse is an alternate reality where the people age so slowly that it's almost safe to say they don't age at all. Batman began his career in 1939, with his youth lasting for decades instead of the normal aging of a human. In a way, this kind of represents how comic book characters seemingly never age and grow old, except in certain stories. By the late 20th century, the world had most of its superheroes. After this point though, things get a little whack. See, Earth became a dystopia ruled by the wealthy, which, I don't know, it seems a bit too real for me. And a great disaster was foreseen that actually came to pass. And the world became very similar to the one in the Earth AD story. Anthropomorphized animals had become the rulers of the planet, with humans devolving, save for Kamandi and a few others. Then, in the 25th century, humanity seemingly built a high-tech society, which saw the rise of Michael Carter, who is Booster Gold. In the 31st century, Earth became the base of the Legion of Superheroes, who were an interplanetary superhero team. This world is just a wild ride. Oh, and it first appeared in Generations Forge #1 in April of 2021. Number 4. The Metalverse. Okay, I know we're going to talk about the Dark Multiverse, but we haven't talked about, and we need to talk about, the Metalverse. So basically, after Perpetua defeated the Justice League, she gave Prime Earth to the Batman Who Laughs. He and his Dark Knights defeated all the heroes and then reshaped the Earth into his vision. Look at this super cool map! He turned Gotham City into a whole continent super city that is guarded by Joker dragons. He made his home Castle Bat, which is another version of Batman who became a sentient Gotham. There is a hell on Earth called the Hellscape, ruled by Wonder Woman. Arkham Wasteland, ruled over by Harley Quinn. A Superman-powered New Apocalypse prison where all the remaining heroes are held. Megapocalypse with a Rainbow Valley where all the Lantern Rings lay because no one is worthy that exists anymore. This version of Earth Prime isn't exactly an alternate universe, but it definitely sounds like it should be. Hey nerds! Just wanted to say thanks for watching. It means a lot to us. If y'all don't mind smacking that like button, it would help us out. And it helps YouTube know we don't suck. Okay, on to the top 3. Number 3. Green Lantern Legacy. Green Lantern Legacy is a one-shot comic from 2020, in which we are given an alternate Earth where the Green Lanterns of Earth were John Stewart, who we already know, and a Vietnamese woman named Kim Tran. Now, Kim Tran, like most of the Green Lanterns, was an awesome hero who never let evil escape her sight, in brightest day or blackest night. She was a pillar for her community too, helping people from all walks of life. And she even helped other Vietnamese immigrants feel at home in this new city. The comic, though, really follows Tai Pham, who is Kim Tran's grandson, as he takes up the mantle of Green Lantern from his grandmother, becoming one of the youngest Green Lanterns at 12 years old. We see him struggle with racism, bullies, his own fears, and against the Yellow Lantern. It's a great story, and it gives some well-needed Vietnamese representation to the DC landscape. Give it a read! Number 2. Deceased. You know how Marvel has the Marvel Zombie storyline? Well, this is basically DC Zombies. That's a bit of an unfair comparison though. The two stories are very different, with the DC version ultimately being slightly more grounded and emotional. In this reality, Cyborg has been captured by Darkseid on Apocalypse, and it's revealed that the anti-life equation lives inside him. When Darkseid tries to take the equation, it is instead corrupted, causing Darkseid to explode Apocalypse, but not before Cyborg was sent to Earth. Once he arrives, he inadvertently infects the entire world with the anti-life equation, which has taken the form of a techno-organic virus. This turns millions of people and a lot of metahumans into zombies. The story follows the survivors as they try to quell the threat, and eventually leave the Earth to settle a new home. I kinda prefer this to the Marvel Zombie story. I don't know, it's a survival story instead of a funny zombie story. I like it. Sue me. Please don't sue me. Number 1. Dark Multiverse. First appearing in Dark Knight's Metal #1 in 2017, the Dark Multiverse is basically the shadow version of the regular DC universe that resides underneath the primary one. So there are negative versions of the 52 Earths of the regular multiverse, but it was also originally the World Forge, meaning it has so many more worlds. For example, there are worlds born from sentient life's hopes and fears. Honestly, each world here could take up a point on this list, but it feels like that's cheating a little. The World Forger was the master of this domain and created the Great Dragon, Barbados, to destroy unstable realities that couldn't join the Orrery of Worlds. Barbados, manipulated by Perpetua, rebelled and defeated the World Forger, creating the Dark Multiverse. A lot more happens after that, but I can't cover that in a 1-minute segment, so Dark Knight's Metal is an amazing story and it deserves your reading.
Number 5. What if Iron Man was trapped in the time of King Arthur? While all of these stories are based on things that actually did happen, this is also based on something that did happen, so if you think it sounds weird because it's just so random, that is a thing that actually happened, where Iron Man and Dr. Doom in main continuity traveled back to the time of Arthurian legend. However, rather than getting back home in this version while Doom manages to leave, he leaves Iron Man trapped in the past. Oh no! A weird turn of events ends up leaving Tony Stark as the ruler and king of England following the death of his friend King Arthur. Tony actually proves to be a great king and lives out his days there in the past just as an accomplished and celebrated ruler. I actually wonder what effect that would have had on the present, because I feel like everything would be very different if Tony Stark were the king of England. This all goes down in issue 33 of the 1997 What If series, so you can check that out if you want. Number 4. What if the Fantastic Four had different superpowers? One of them is just being a giant brain. It's true. Actually, overall, these powers feel very Doom Patrol meets X-Men in my opinion. In this alternate story, when subjected to cosmic radiation, the FF get completely different powers than what each member has in main continuity. Johnny becomes a robot, Ben gets dragon-like wings, Reed is just a disembodied brain, admittedly not a very great power, and Sue ends up with the least original powers, getting Reed's old powers instead, the ability to stretch her body like Taffy or Silly Putty. Really, I feel like Sue always gets sort of like the worst part of these stories whenever she's in a What If. Hers are always so like quick or just so kinda lame, and I'm like, dang, why does an invisible woman get some cool stuff? I think she was still Invisible Girl at this time though, maybe that's why. Number 3. What if Aunt May instead of her nephew Peter had been bitten by that radioactive spider? This story reimagines what would have happened if once again it was not Peter Parker who received the fateful radioactive spider bite, but instead was his elderly Aunt May. This is from a humor issue, so you know it's gonna be weird and you know it's gonna be great. And it is. Aunt May here ends up getting bit after realizing that Peter had left his lunch at home on the day he and his class were meant to visit the exhibit at the Science Institute. And if you're like, Amanda, it's not called the Science Institute. Seriously, if you go to this issue, that is what is written on the building in the Science Institute. Of what? We don't know. She successfully delivers the forgotten lunch to Peter, cottage cheese and mashed string beans, but ends up feeling unwell on her way home, and finds that she has developed superpowers. She makes her own costume, becoming Spider-Man, and ends up facing off in this story with the ridiculous villain, Leapfrog. Because that's just how it goes. Number 2. What if the Fantastic Four all had the stretching powers of Mr. Fantastic? Oh boy, I love this issue because we get 4 stories where we get to imagine what it would be like if multiple members of the FF shared basically the same powers. And in the one where they all get stretching powers, they just never end up becoming the Fantastic Four because their collective power is just considered, well, kinda lame. Sue in fact insists that they never let anyone know of their powers because she feels like, and I quote, a freak. Both Sue and Ben feel as though the stretching powers are ridiculous, monstrous, ugly, and dumb, while Reed and Johnny actually think they're pretty neat and even could be useful. Still, Sue and Ben's way of thinking wins out, so the Fantastic Four never become a superhero team. The end. Number 1. What if Thanos had changed Galactus into a human being? I really love this What If story personally. It comes to us from, once again, one of the humor issues of What If, so you know it's gonna be a riot. In this story, Thanos turns Galactus into a human being in order to defeat him, and Galactus ends up on Earth with no memory of who he was or is. He does, however, happen to look a lot like Elvis Presley, and even sings and plays like him too. He meets a woman named Gertrude who introduces him to the works of Presley, and Galactus is basically convinced that he must indeed be like an amnesiac version of Elvis Presley, returned from the dead. He goes on to have a successful music career, and when his memories are later restored by Adam Warlock, who also offers to return his power to him, he actually decides instead to stay on Earth and live out his life here as Elvis with Gertrude and her son Toby, which, I mean, fair enough. That sounds like a pretty good life. Number 10. What if the X-Men had lost Inferno? This very chaotic and fire-filled, demon horde-infested story comes to us from What If Volume 2, issue number 6. And we are starting it off hot, friends. This is quite a dark story. Here we get to imagine what the fate of the world would have been like had the X-Men failed in defeating Madeline Pryor during the events of Inferno. Instead, she and Sim take over the planet Earth, unleashing hordes of demons on it and ruling it together. However, the heroes who have survived their reign of terror manage to band together and, using their power, fight back. In the end, they do win the day, but not without casualties. Wolverine himself in the story ends up becoming the pet of the Goblin Queen, and Sim fully giving into his feral rage and feeding on the innocent. Ugh. He only becomes free from the fog of his rage after he kills Kitty Pryde tragically and realizes the monster that he has become. Number 9. What if Captain America were revived today? 1983. Because there's another one of these from like, I think 1994, so yeah, but that's in volume 2. We're going to volume 1. There are actually a few different stories involving Captain America being revived in the modern day or simply evolving with time as it passed. So 1994, and I think there's also another one of them which might even be on this list. But in this What If from volume 1, issue 44, we get a darker take on what a modern day Cap could look like in the 80s. This version of the hero ends up turning America into a heavily monitored and policed country during his witch hunt for communists. Fortunately, as dark as that all is, we learn that this isn't the real Captain America but an imposter that took his place after he went MIA. The real Cap returns and battles it out with imposter Cap, but in the end, the real Captain America turns to the people of America to undo all the damage done. He asks them to take responsibility, as while they were led to this point by a false version of him, they also allowed themselves to be led falsely. It's honestly a really good speech that even today rings true in a lot of ways, at least for me, and it provides the silver lining and shining hope for an otherwise pretty dark tale. Little grains of hope, that's all we need. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more what if lists, be sure to let us know by giving this a thumbs up, sharing it, doing all the things. Also, if you want more what if content, we do have a playlist now for that. Yay! Number 8. What if Wolverine killed the Hulk? In issue 31 of the 1977 What If series, we find out what would happen if instead, when Wolverine first met the Hulk, he had killed him. Wolverine goes on to celebrate his victory against the big green Goliath after killing him, having some drinks and throwing some punches like he usually does at the local tavern. However, in the end, things get out of hand and he accidentally kills one of the patrons in a rage. When he seeks help from the military to protect and defend him, they actually turn their back on Wolverine, and so he ends up joining the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He becomes a sleeper agent for Magneto, infiltrating the X-Men. However, when Magneto finally plans on enacting his plan to defeat and capture the X-Men, Wolverine has a change of heart, feeling as though he has truly found acceptance and a family with the mutant team of heroes. He battles Magneto one-on-one, and the two kill one another in the end. It's a pretty tragic tale. Basically, all what ifs with Wolverine I feel like are usually pretty sad. Pretty sad or pretty dark. Number 7. What if Captain America had not vanished during World War II? See, another Captain America story because I love these. This story comes to us from issue 5 of volume 1, aka the 1977 What If series. While Captain America does not get trapped in the ice and Bucky never goes missing, presumed dead, only to become brainwashed and repurposed by the Soviet Union as the Winter Soldier, a worse fate seemingly awaits both of these heroes. Neither having ever disappeared, Steve goes on to fight as Captain America until he eventually retires from the mantle, becoming instead the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Bucky ends up taking his place, becoming the new Cap, as we have also seen happen in modern comics, and Rick Jones ends up becoming Buck's new sidekick, also going by the mantle of Bucky, because I guess Rick or Ricky just doesn't have the same zing to it? Sadly though, Cap Bucky ends up dying on a mission, and Sharon Carter, Agent 13, who had hoped to settle down with Bucky after his final mission, blames Steve for his death. She actually accuses him of robbing him of his childhood and putting him in danger. Pretty intense. And then of course it ends with Rick volunteering to become the new Cap, so the deadly cycle it seems is destined to still continue in this timeline. You'd feel like after that all happened, Steve might be like, maybe we won't do that again, it didn't go great the last time. But he's just like, ah yes, Rick Jones, now you will be Captain America and probably die. What if the Green Goblin stole the Infinity Gauntlet? This story comes to us from the What If Infinity Dark Reign one-shot. Here we see Green Goblin dealing with a lot of family drama and trauma from his past. He steals the Infinity Gauntlet and not only uses it to defeat, well, all the heroes of planet Earth and beyond, but it's also revealed that his true motivation for doing all of this and pretty much everything that he's done is to win his father's approval. His father, who was always so unimpressed and who for a long time mistreated him, pushing Norman towards greatness or else. When Norman showcases his villainous accomplishments, it only causes his father to revile him even more though. Norman then decides to use his Infinity Gauntlet to snap and influence his father, making him proud of him instead. But this makes his father's love and approval feel pretty empty, especially when Norman learns that his altered dad actually really only loves him just because he's his son, and not for all that he has accomplished. Which you would think would be really nice, but to Norman he's like, that's infuriating, I hate that. Norman erases his father from existence, and in so doing, erases himself. Don't you hate when that happens?
Number 5. What if the alien costume had possessed Spider-Man? What if Volume 2, Issue 4? We see a darker turn of events with Peter in that new black alien suit. Now we see a world where the sonic blast didn't break the two of them apart, they just stayed together and then trouble happens. The symbiote claims that Spider-Man and him are now one, and Reed Richards couldn't detect the symbiote for days because Spider-Sense and the symbiote's camouflage powers, he was like, eh, good luck, zoom, disappeared. Now the symbiote ends up ripping through the Avengers, and due to the fact that Peter was stuck with the symbiote problem, he couldn't save S.H.I.E.L.D. agents like he normally would. They ended up biting the bullet because of this, and then Peter ended up losing 50 years of his life trying to deal with this. He ended up dying of old age just on the ground. It's dark, but it's a really good what if. Number 4. What if Spider-Man had a Spider-Girl? What if Volume 2, Issue 105, Mayday Parker has another chance of life rather than, you know, be written out. Now this takes place years after her father Peter retired. Now Mayday Parker began getting powers of her own when she was around 15 years old, and when Normie Osborn stepped up as the new Green Goblin, she stepped up as the new Webhead. She found an old outfit that belonged to Ben Reilly and became Spider-Girl. Now the issue did so well that Marvel launched its own universe to continue these stories. Now it's called the MC2 universe. Number 3. What if Kraven the Hunter had killed Spider-Man? Ooh, it's dark. Written by Richard Howell, Volume 2, Issue 17. Now this one is dark, obviously by the title you know what's gonna happen, but it's really compelling. What if Kraven had killed Spider-Man? Okay, so we start with Pete in the streets, he's patrolling the city when he's suddenly trapped by Kraven, and just like that, he unloads a beating. He kills Peter, and then to celebrate, he eats a bunch of spiders, and then suits up in his clothes. Like, what a weirdo. What a monster. So now he's Spider-Man. He's the captain now. Okay, cool. Now what's step 2, you freak? At the same time, MJ is approached by a couple of thugs on the street, and then in comes Spider-Man to save her. Now MJ can tell something's up because Spider-Man doesn't even recognize her, first of all, and the way that he's fighting these guys is just brutal, like it's not for the faint of heart. So Captain America, Daredevil, and Human Torch jump in to see what is going on with the wall crawler. Now they did a decent job wearing down the beast, but still they needed more power. So he ate a bunch of spiders earlier, so now it's only fair if he tries to eat Spider-Man's dead body, right? I guess? So MJ tells Cap and the gang that Spider-Man is actually Peter Parker. This Spider-Man is indeed not the same. So that's one scenario that happens. Spider-Man's identity's out, which sucks. And then Aunt May goes into denial hearing that news, and now she's messed up for life. And the media isn't happy with the tension between supers and the public either at this point. So the story ends up with MJ standing at Peter's funeral, wondering how things could have been. God, Peter can't catch a break in any of these universes. Number 2, what if Spider-Man had never become a crime fighter? One of my favorite what ifs, this is so amazing. Okay, what if issue 19, written by Peter Gillis? We see a life for Peter if he decided to take out his uncle's killer in that moment instead of, letting him get away and then the rest of his life happening the way it did. So what if Spidey was Spider-Man but just for the fame? What if he just wanted to be a famous dude? Go get the TV news people, he says. Also, TV news people, that's a funny way to put it. Now he's the big dog in town. He just wants to brag about how he takes down these criminals. He even refers to Flash as a nobody, which I mean, words hurt, Peter. Like that's, you don't call somebody a nobody. That's pretty rude. And then he goes on the Johnny Carson show to be the cool cat in town, where it's revealed on the show that John Jameson, American astronaut, had died upon re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. And then JJ is heartbroken that the real heroes have to die instead of these costume clowns just kicking their feet back, talking shit on talk shows, So Peter realizes what matters most by the end of the story, thankfully. But having Flash call a nobody, it's honestly worth the read for all the bad stuff that happens. Number 1, what if someone else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider? Okay, this one is jam-packed. We have 3 different scenarios to enjoy, and this is one that I definitely left this one for number 1 for a reason. It's so good. I mean, first of all, like I said earlier, who wouldn't want to be Spider-Man? You probably imagined it to yourself when I said it. What would you do if you were Spider-Man? Would you go for the fame? Would you kind of lay low? Would you take out criminals in like a cool way? Would you tell your family? Would you make a Twitter? Would you I am Iron Man it and just tell everybody? Well, in What If Volume 1, Issue 7, back in the late 70s, we see Flash Thompson, Betty Brant, and John Jameson all get their shot at being the web slinger, and it's way harder than I thought it was gonna be. So Flash gets bit and he teaches a bad driver a lesson, and he's maybe a little bit too harsh, not gonna lie. And then he decides, oh, you know what, I'm pretty good at fighting people, I'm gonna take a crack at professional wrestling. But due to his super strength, he accidentally kills a guy doing this. The Vulture has an easy time taking him on as well, so it's not really the best in any scenario. And then Betty Brant is now up next. Now her costume is pretty sweet. It makes for great photo shoots, apparently. But while she was making TikToks, she ran out of web fluid, and when a thief ran by and got away, she had no web stuff. She couldn't do anything. She was like, I used my powers. I'm out for the day. See ya. And that thief was the one who took Uncle Ben's life. And then next up is JJ's son, John Jameson. While his outfit was pretty on point, his judgment was not. He wasn't good at the superhero life, and he died trying to stop a space shuttle from crashing. So we like ending on fun notes here at Top 10 Nerd. Kicking off the list at number 10, what if the Fantastic Four had not gained their superpowers? Okay, the Fantastic Four, the FF, they got their powers when they were on a space mission, and all of a sudden cosmic radiation entered the chat. Powers were given to them all at the same time, each obtaining a hint of the elements. But what if this space mission didn't go south? What if that cosmic storm didn't get past the spaceship's shielding? Well, afterwards, the Rocket Group, that's what they're called after, becomes the highest ranking space industry, so even without powers, they're still awesome. But when Mole Man's monsters come along to attack, the team still comes out on top because science always wins. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be so great. It helps the channel out a lot. Or if you want to hit subscribe, our faces will pop up on your feed. How lovely is that? Number 9, what if Spider-Man had rescued Gwen Stacy? Yes, okay, I remember sitting in the theater watching The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is so underrated as a movie. Side note, it gets way too much for some reason. But when Gwen was falling in the clock tower, I held my breath. I knew what was gonna happen, and to this day, it's one of the saddest scenes in a comic book film. So this what if certainly helped ease that pain. Issue 24 shows us a world where he caught Gwen, and after that, it's beautiful. He proposes, he reveals his identity to her, and on top of that, Harry and Norman reunite. They work it out. All of the wins, look at this. And then when Peter and Gwen do get married at the ceremony, they're doing the cha-cha slide, which I personally love doing. But then J. Jonah Jameson bursts in with a bunch of police officers with footage that reveals Peter Parker as Spider-Man. So at this point, Peter was forced to run for the rest of his life to protect the ones that he loved. I had you in the first half. I know I did. These what ifs are mostly sad. Number 8, what if the Phoenix had not died? Issue 27 of What If again shows us a brighter future. Well, at least it starts that way. In this alternate reality, Jean didn't die. She was actually reborn again, and then when the X-Men have to take on Galactus and Terrax in the Shi'ar Galaxy, she uses that Phoenix Force to get the job done. She puts an end to Galactus, which sounds great on paper, but the Phoenix Force starts to amplify and get a little bit more and more out of control. So she accidentally destroyed a small star and other asteroids, and when she returns to the X-Mansion, she's now in hot water for destroying yet another star. Shadowcat is not pleased, so Jean turns into the Dark Phoenix and takes out Shadowcat and Polaris and Cyclops, and also planet Earth, and then shortly after consumes the universe. That escalated quickly. Wow. Number 7. What if the Punisher was a hall monitor? Dipping into a more comedic side of things because the last two were just straight tragic, the Punisher as a hall monitor. Short and sweet, and it couldn't get any better. He's watching the halls in a quiet, generic grade school in a typical town in USA. You can find this in Volume 2, Issue 34. It's pretty intense. I mean, it goes for the comedic take, but Frank Castle being Frank Castle in front of any children? That's a nightmare. They thought they were off the hook at the beginning of the issue. The kids reiterate the fact that the Hulk is no longer watching these halls, so they're fine. So once the Punisher sends them to the principal's office after getting caught, the last panel we see is the Hulk in the principal's chair now. It's a short one, but the idea is actually terrifying and hilarious all at the same time. Poor kids. I thought my principal was scary. I thought Mr. Hubert was scary. No, the Hulk is a bit more scary. A bit, just a little bit. Number 6. What if the Beast and the Thing continued to mutate? Volume 1, Issue 37. When the Thing is being mutated from Virus X in the normal timeline, Captain America tells him about MODOK's base, but in this tale, the Thing takes off before he gets a chance to do so. So Captain America and Giant Man raid MODOK's base on their own, then they get the antidote that Bill can now use to cure his cancer. Ben reaches this point when he's evolving, and he ends up releasing all of this cosmic energy that 1. Cured himself of Virus X, and 2. Cured Alicia's blindness. Double win. Yes. Grimm is happy with the family, and the newly cured Giant Man takes Ben's spot on the Fantastic Four. It's good. This is a good one. We got one. Nice.
Number 5. What if Ben Parker's nephew was Galactus? I love this story. This is a humorous what if story included in issue 3 of volume 2 of the What If series. In this story, we find out what would have happened if Uncle Ben's nephew was Galactus instead of Peter. Galactus arrives home to find out that his Uncle Ben has been murdered, but he refuses to accept this, mourning the death of his uncle, who gave him his very first microscope. Oh no. With a mere thought, he vaporizes his uncle's murderer, reducing him to protoplasmic slime. Then he uses the power cosmic to restore his uncle to full health, even giving him powers and turning him into a Silver Surfer version of himself. Silver Uncle Ben? The story has a happy ending with Aunt May satiating her nephew's hunger with a very hefty helping of wheat cakes. Oh, it's so great. It's so wholesome. Number 4. What if Wolverine had lived during the age of Conan the Barbarian? Or more specifically, what if Wolverine had fallen through a portal and ended up in the age of Conan the Barbarian and then lived on there? Yeah. This is what happens here, and of course, because this is what this story was always meant to be about, Wolverine and Conan end up going head to head, because we all know this is really a what if Wolverine and Conan fought each other story. In the end, Wolverine falls for Red Sonja because redheads, and Conan also ends up falling for Jean because redheads, after he falls back through a portal that sends him to Wolverine's time by accident. All in all, Conan ends up getting pretty messed up here, losing his hand, and then when he does return to Wolverine's time, without Logan's presence, Jean ends up going full Dark Phoenix and basically destroys the universe. Meanwhile, it's a happy ending for Wolverine, who stays in Conan's age and ends up with Red Sonja. What a strange but fantastic adventure. You can check this one out in issue 16 of the second What If volume, starting in 1989. Number 3. What if Spider-Man married Black Widow? This one is another one-panel story brought to us in Volume 1's jam-packed humor issue, issue 34. Here we see a one-panel story that answers the question, what if Black Widow and Spider-Man ended up getting married? This is also just a strange question to pose, as these two, well, they don't have a ton of interaction in the comics, and they've never really been known to have any kind of long-lasting romance that could potentially lead to wedding bells. However, there could be a reason for that, it turns out. The what if uses a bit of wordplay for this scenario, implying that because Natasha is a Black Widow, she would end up eating Spider-Man. After all, that is what Black Widows try to do, in nature that is. I don't know if Black Widow could actually catch Spider-Man in the comics. I feel like he might be a little too fast, and he's also got a spidey sense, but whatever, it's just a fun what if story, so taking it way too seriously. Number 2. What if the original Marvel bullpen had become the Fantastic Four? In this what if, we get to imagine what it would be like if the original Marvel bullpen had become the FF in real life, each being given their own superpowers matching the actual Fantastic Four team. Stan Lee as such becomes Mr. Fantastic, Flo Steinberg becomes Invisible Woman, or Invisible Girl as she was still known then, Sol Brodsky becomes the Human Torch, and Jack Kirby becomes the ever-loving Thing. The story is crazy over the top, and it doesn't seem to paint any of them them into kind of a light, to be honest, with the staff being transformed by a mysterious device delivered to the office sent courtesy of the S people. But who are the S people? They end up becoming even more famous than their comic book counterparts, the original Fantastic Four, and eventually ask Prince Namor for help. They don't get turned back into their normal selves, but they do uncover the mystery of who the S people are. Any guesses? S, it turns out, stands for Skrull. Surprise. I mean, I was kind of surprised by that because I was like, what starts with an S? And for some reason, Skrull did not come to my mind. Not reading a lot of Skrull stuff lately, obviously. Number 1. What if you were the Red Skull? I get the idea of what if you were Spider-Man, but what if you were the Red Skull? I mean, out of all the villains to pick, that is certainly a weird one to include here, Marvel. I did not see that coming. This story is also featured in issue 34 of the 1989 volume of What If, right under Spider-Man. Now, I see what they were trying to do, give you the option of a what if you were a hero or what if you were a villain, because, you know, that seems kind of fair. But I mean, given Red Skull's history, it just seems like a weird one to include when you could have picked, I don't know, a bunch of any other villains that exist that people might want to be more. Like, what about Doctor Doom or Green Goblin, which would make sense with Spidey, or even sometimes villain, sometimes hero, all-time thief, Black Cat. I mean, I would want to be Black Cat. Wouldn't you want to be Black Cat? She's so cool. Number 10. What if Jane Foster had found the Hammer of Thor? This one isn't so strange for the premise, but it's more bizarre because of where the premise took us in the end. This is a story we've also seen adapted to the main continuity, though fortunately it does not quite share this same ending, which I'm pretty happy about, to be honest. Jane ends up finding the Hammer of Thor and becoming the goddess of storms, taking up the mantle Thordis. Lady Sif, missing Thor, ends up finding and falling in love with Donald Blake, who is later revealed, of course, to be the true Thor when Odin asks Thordis to return his hammer to him. As thanks for her service, however, Odin makes Jane a goddess. However, as Jane was in love with Donald, who is now Thor and is in love with Lady Sif, her heart is broken and she has to be returned to her mortal self because of this. But Odin has a better solution and proposes to Jane, who agrees, to marry him, and then they all live happily ever after. With Jane finding that those very qualities she both admired and loved in the mortal Don Blake are also to be found in the father of immortal Thor. My goodness. That's a very strange ending to that story. How about instead of being with my son, you be with me, his father, haha. Okay, Odin, what? I feel like I like it better when Odin just doesn't really like Jane. I think that works more. Is that weird? Number 9. What if the Avengers were the last superheroes on Earth? This story allows us to imagine what the world would be like if all the superpowered beings on Earth were defeated by the Avengers. At the behest of the Scarlet Centurion, the Avengers attempt to eradicate all superpowered beings, including themselves. In the end, after all threats have been defeated, they decide to disband, being the last ones with powers, in order to usher in an era of peace on Earth. They all go off to live their own normal-ish lives. Thor returns to Asgard, Tony returns to being a billionaire playboy in Las Vegas, only to realize that it doesn't really bring him any joy and actually considers entering into politics. And Janet Van Dyne and Hank Pym actually seem to find quite a bit of happiness, going off and getting married and focusing on their time with one another, which is kind of sweet. I guess if they weren't superheroes, it would work out pretty well for them. Scarlet Centurion does return to threaten Earth and forces the Avengers to come together one more time, but after defeating him, they once again go their separate ways back into retirement. And they also kind of question, like, if being a superhero is actually a bad thing, because does it create more problems than it solves? Just a quick reminder, if you love these what if lists, I personally love bringing them to you because these stories are amazing. Be sure to show us that love by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing, commenting, subscribing, all the things. Number 8. What if the Gamma Bomb spawned 1,000 Hulks? This story comes to us from volume 2 of the What If series that started back in 1989. In issue 71, we get to imagine a reality where instead of just one Hulk, or you know, the members of the Hulk family plus Hulk, we had 1,000 of them, which I would say is ultimately too many Hulks. In this story, it was the bombing on Hiroshima that resulted in these thousands of Hulks coming into existence, survivors of the attack that were basically mutated, so they became Hulks. In the end, Bruce Banner, aka Hulk, who of course goes on to become the Hulk in the story, must attempt to stand up against this army and attempt to defeat it with the help of some friends. Number 7. What if Betty Brant, instead of Spider-Man, had been bitten by the radioactive spider? This one comes to us from a 3-part story and is simply one story within that. It is from the original What If series Volume 1 from 1997, issue number 7. Here, Betty Brant, instead of Peter Parker, is the one bitten by the radioactive spider, gaining spider-like abilities. While the story isn't a strange premise at all, like I don't think it's weird for Betty Brant to become, a version of Spider-Man, what really makes this one stand out for me in terms of its weirdness is Betty's costume here, which is... it's something. It's also odd that in this alternate reality, Betty happens to be the only alternate person to become Spider-Man that manages to survive the ordeal, with both John Jameson and Flash Thompson in this issue, who are featured in the other 2 stories, dying as a result of gaining spider powers and attempting to use them. Instead of Betty choosing not to pursue the thief that kills Peter's Uncle Ben, she simply is unable to because she used up all her web fluid posing for pictures for Peter. Which is a whole other thing. But also, wait, can't you just go after them anyways? Don't you have superpowers? It doesn't matter that your web fluid is gone. Anyways, she still blames herself for Uncle Ben's death and decides to quit being Spider Lady, which I think is a little harsh. I feel like she wasn't really super responsible for that, but I guess she could have gone after him. I don't know why she didn't do that. Be like, use your super strength, climb on walls, do any of the other things you can do. Number 6. What if Submariner never regained his memories? This story allows us to glimpse into an alternate reality where Namor never met the Human Torch and never ended up regaining his memories and returning to Atlantis, learning that he was the true ruler of the underwater kingdom. Instead, the Submariner remains unaware of his true heritage and ends up joining a ship's crew, finding himself inexplicably drawn to the sea. I wonder why. The captain of the ship, Namor's friend McCandless, ends up being mutineered against and goes overboard while injured when he believes they found the lost entrance to the center of the earth. Namor, or Mr. Smith as he's known, follows after him and ends up being retrieved from the ice-cold water by Inuits later on. They end up worshipping Namor as the Lord of the Frozen Sea, along with frozen Captain America, who they worship as the Lord of the Frozen Ice. And Namor's like, I guess this is my life now, and I'm pretty good with it. So I guess it all worked out in the end, and now he just gets to be the Lord of the Sea really far up north where it's cold. Cool, I guess?
Number 5. What if the Avengers had never been? Written by Jim Shooter and Gil Kane, released in 1977, this was actually the first What If issue with a major death. So of course it has to be on the list somewhere. So we start off with the Hulk. Now this time he's not hitting, he's actually quitting. Now this caused the Avengers to dismantle. So Stark asked Rick Jones to find the Hulk, Thor went back to Asgard, and Jan and Hank went back to living as normal people. So Rick finds him, but he's now being held hostage from the Green Giant. So Stark swoops in and saves him, and they head back to the Avengers mansion. So Namor and the Hulk call out the Avengers, or rather what's left of them. So Iron Man makes a few iron suits for the others, and the suits, I mean, they aren't Tony Stark. They can't control these things nearly as well as he can. Unless you're in the movie Iron Man 3, then everyone can do that all of a sudden. So they stay in retirement. They're like, screw that, I don't want any part of that. So he's like, whatever. He powers up his own suit a little bit too much, and then he heads to the battle alone. He fights a bit, and then right when he's about to be ended, the rest show up. Jan, Hank, and Rick are back. Nice. So Tony is done at this point. His armor is weak, he's close to being finished off, so he uses his remaining power to regenerate Hank's armor. So the Hulk snaps out of it and goes after Namor, while the rest of our heroes mourn over a fallen Tony Stark, who sacrificed himself to save his team. Similar vibes to Endgame. A lot of feels in that one, okay? A lot of feels. A good number 5 feels train. Number 4. What if somebody else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider? Written by Don Glutt, released in 1977, we get to see a dream play out. Look, we've all probably wanted to be Spider-Man at one point or another. Of course, I mean, doing backflips and swinging downtown, that's gotta be the vibe. But of course, when it comes to stopping criminals and taking out supervillains, it's probably pretty stressful. So in this What If, we get to see this idea play out. We see other characters have a crack at the life of the web slinger, starting with Flash Thompson. And let's just say it's a lot harder than it looks. So we got Flash Thompson. Now after he gets bit, he teaches a bad driver a lesson, and he feels pretty good with his new given abilities, and he plays it out a bit. So he decides to take a crack at professional wrestling, maybe make some cash, which is a pretty good idea. I mean, you're a superhero, so you can definitely win most, if not all, fights. But he accidentally kills the guy. Sorry, oops. Then Betty Brant is now up with the powers. Okay, so let's see how she would do in the life. Well, her costume for starters is pretty badass. But when she runs out of web fluid while making TikToks, a thief runs by and gets away. And that thief, of course, being the one to take Uncle Ben's life. So far, so bad. Now finally, we have our third contender with the powers. John Jameson. While his outfit was also pretty good, he couldn't do the job like Peter, and he actually died while trying to prevent a space shuttle from crashing. I guess it's not as easy as it looks. I mean, to be fair, if something actually happened and I had webs, I really wouldn't know what to do. I would do a backflip and be like, is it fixed? No? It was cool though. Number 3. What if the Punisher killed Daredevil? We all know the Punisher as the guy who usually brutally kills criminals. See, with superheroes, those guys he likes to hit with a tranquilizer. But in this what if, we see Daredevil get hit with one of those tranq darts and fall off a building. So while Kingpin prepared for his next step now that he's out of the way, Spider-Man stepped in to deliver some justice on Frank Castle. So he finds the Punisher, and Punisher has no tranq darts left. So he shoots Spider-Man in the shoulder. It's messy, but not fatal, he says. He should survive unless he exerts himself, which he does. And his identity is then revealed. Then it cuts to Aunt May's house and she grabs a paper, reads the shocking headline, and then the house explodes from a missile launched from the Silvermane City. Boom, house gone. And then after a little while, Peter shows up in a hospital gown, ready to get some revenge on Frank. Peter does pretty well in the fight, so well he's actually just moments away from throwing the Punisher off of a building to his death. But the Punisher stalls and says he has info about his Aunt May, and this slows Peter down for just a split second, allowing for the Punisher to unload on Peter. God, imagine if they introduced Frank Castle in the MCU and then they immediately did something like this. Number 2, what if Kraven the Hunter had killed Spider-Man? Released in 1990, written by Richard Howell. Yeah, judging by this title alone, this one's a little sad. I figured we're already on the Spider-Man misfortune train, so I had to throw this one in next, you know? What if Kraven had killed Spider-Man? Okay, so we start with Pete patrolling the streets when he's suddenly trapped by Kraven in a net, and just like that, he unloads, killing Peter Parker. And of course, he eats a bunch of spiders and suits up himself to celebrate. Yeah, you eat a bunch of spiders, now you're Spider-Man. That's how it works. I think a human eats like, what, 7 spiders in a year when they're sleeping? So we have like, what, 7,000 to go? So now he's Spider-Man, just like that, cool. Meanwhile, MJ is like, where on earth is that Peter Parker guy? And then MJ is approached by a couple of thugs, and then in comes Spider-Man to save her. Only it's Kraven, but she doesn't know that. But she can tell something's up because Spider-Man doesn't recognize her, and he's way more brutal with taking out these thugs. So Cap, Daredevil, and Human Torch jump in to see what's up with the wall crawler. They did a decent job of wearing down the beast, but he needed more power. He ate a bunch of spiders earlier, so now it's only fair if he tries to eat Spider-Man's dead body, right? Comics are weird. So MJ tells Cap and the gang that Spider-Man is actually Peter Parker, and that the Spider-Man is indeed not the same. And then Aunt May goes into denial hearing about the news. She's messed up now for life. And the media isn't happy with the tension between supers and the public. The story ends with MJ standing at Peter's funeral, wondering how things could have been. God, Peter just can't catch a break, eh? Oh my God. And finally, number 1, the saddest of them all, what if Wolverine father? Written by Rob Williams, released in 2011, we start off with Wolverine taking out the Winter Soldier. And we see a world with Wolverine and Daken if they had spent their life growing together as father and son. So now we get to see what it would have been like if Logan was there for them the whole time. Now in this reality, they're named John. This life, however, was filled with repression and lies and led to John leaving his home and rising up as Daken, becoming the leader of the Japanese underworld. So Wolverine tried to save him, but because of the way he was raised with this version of Logan, he looked at him like a monster. He viewed himself as a monster too. This is the Muramasa blade, John, says Logan as he stabs him. Healing factors don't work on it. The issue ends with the boy dying beside his father, and Logan uses the same blade on himself. Kicking off the list with number 10, What If the Juggernaut? Okay, to start this sad list, we got What If starring the Juggernaut. It was released in 1997, written by George Gonzalez, and we kick off in a world where Sentinels have already wiped out all superheroes. Great start. Plus there's this toxic gas that's filling up the atmosphere, which will kill all of life. So things are beginning grim right off the bat, okay. And all that's left now at this point is just the Juggernaut. Now he's hunting down these Sentinels. He wants to die, but his own invulnerability won't let that happen. Kind of like Hulk the End, just a sad, strong man in a world full of rubble. So he sees Iron Man's helmet, he sees Cyclops' cracked visor. He's just walking down horrible memory lane. Then he meets a couple of surviving mutants, and they're not in good condition mentally. I mean, They're actually blaming Juggernaut for killing the X-Men, and it all ends with Juggernaut knowing he's going to be the last living being on the planet and that it's his own damn fault. And before we go on to number 9 for our next sad what if story, if you guys could go ahead and please like this video, or else we'll be on a what if you didn't like the video, and then it's going to be a sad video on all the alternate futures where you didn't like our videos. So please go ahead and do that, because that would be great. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to the list. Number 9. What if Cable had destroyed the X-Men? Well, this one just sounds bad right off the hop. So after Professor X came back to Earth, the team was never going to be the same again. At this X-Men meeting, Xavier gets in a fight with Cable, and then all of a sudden it turns into Cable and his crew versus everybody, and it was just this big brawl. Now they escape, but later on, Cable kills Xavier, Jean, and Scott with a siren bomb. So now everybody's deciding on what to do with this guy. Wolverine's team wanted to kill him, and Storm's team wanted to bring him in. Both are pretty bad. So the Avengers have to step in and fight their battles while they're all working their own stuff out over there. So the Avengers are like, just do your thing, we're gonna go fight your bad guys, just wrap it up. But eventually Cable and his team is killed by Wolverine's team. Number 8, what if Wolverine battled Conan the Barbarian? Written by Glenn Herdling and released in 1990, what if Wolverine had battled Conan the Barbarian? So basically Conan and Wolverine switch dimensions. So we have Wolverine causing trouble in the Hyborian Age alongside Red Sonja, and Conan smashes Cyclops in the head with a rock, which causes the full fury of the Phoenix Force to be unleashed. So now this has caused a ripple effect, so the psychic rapport was shattered, and without Wolverine to hurl Colossus at her, there's nothing that prevents Jean Grey from transforming into her dark persona before she can destroy herself, resulting in the destruction of the entire universe. So just like that, Cyclops gets hit with a rock and then it all goes to shit. So yeah, crossovers are for sure fun, but you gotta look at the possible ways it could go poorly as well. Wolverine versus Conan the Barbarian is definitely one of those ways. Number 7, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? In this reality, Professor X is the one who becomes Juggernaut and gets buried. Now this causes him to go down a completely different path when it comes down to the X-Men, because after this, he never ended up creating the X-Men because he was stuck. So now the Fantastic Four wants to defeat Magneto instead. So Professor X, he's still listening. He's using his mind powers. He's knowing what's going on out there. He's kind of getting pissed that he's not able to go out and help. So he digs his way out, and his telepathy powers are now stronger than ever with his new Juggernaut super strength. So he takes over the country with his own X-Men posse to enforce these anti-human laws. So Cyclops even sided with Magneto at this point because he could block Xavier's telepathy. So they're battling it out on Asteroid M, and Cyclops is trying to remind Xavier about his original dream, with humans and mutants living together in harmony. And before he could really consider it, the ground beneath him exploded and he got launched into space, probably forever, and man, that's gotta be boring. Imagine not dying in space. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. This should be number 1 maybe, I don't know. Number 6, what if the Hulk died and Kyra lived? Written by Greg Pak, released in 2007. Okay, so we start with the Hulk saving Kyra by throwing her out of the way of the explosion instead of the ship. So now the Hulk had died along with Crown City. And Kyra, she's pretty pissed, right? She takes all the old power from the planet and gets ready with her sights set on Earth. She's coming. First stop, of course, being the moon, where she defeats Black Bolt and then implants a obedience disc on him. So when Strange and Sentry come to the rescue, she makes Black Bolt use his sonic scream, which of course results in both of them dying. She's killing everybody fast, okay? So Heroine comes to stop her and says that basically if you kill everybody on Earth, nobody can honor your dead husband. So she says, fine, but you're gonna wish you were dead instead. And then it cuts to 21 years later, and she's made all the remaining heroes build this massive Hulk statue. And when it's finally done, she walks onto the hand of the statue and then turns into stone, joining him. The end. Yeah, how sad is that? I mean, I feel like it wouldn't take those guys 21 years to build a statue. I mean, if they're getting paid by the hour, sure, then by all means, go for it.
Number 5, actual Black Widow. Black Widow in issue 34 of What If gets her own little mini comic taking up a third of a page. It's really kind of like just a panel. It answers the question, what if Spider-Man had married the Black Widow? Well, it wouldn't end well apparently. The joke is based on what Black Widows are known to do to their mates in nature. Female Black Widows, that is. In nature, they eat their mates, hence why in this comic, Spider-Man doesn't fare too well. The implication is that Black Widow actually eats Peter here. We see her picking her teeth, looking quite content and burping, while behind her, Spider-Man's suit looks pretty deflated with bones poking out of it and littered around it. So, yeah.
You! Yes, you. In this issue of What If, the question is posed, what if you were Spider-Man? They start with a panel of Spider-Man swinging Mary Jane to safety, and they even encourage you to paste a picture of your own face over Spider-Man's to make it even more immersive. But moving forward, this issue doesn't really take much time to explore that question before absolutely roasting you beyond words. The very next panel shows a big group of all of Spider-Man's villains standing in a graveyard, pointing and laughing at a gravestone that reads, "Here lies, fill in your name here," and in big bold letters says, "You'd be dead, you're no superhero." So mean, but also very funny. I thought this was a great one to include because as much as Marvel is known for their meta commentary, this is just on a whole different level.
Number 3, Galen. Galactus may be better known as a villain in the Marvel Universe, the main Marvel Universe, or at least a powerful antagonist if you will, but in the what if reality of Earth 92201, he's actually better known for being a sort of everyday hero, if you will. When Galen as Galactus ends up in battle against Thanos, who wields the Infinity Gauntlet, he ends up defeated, being transformed into an amnesiac human left on planet Earth. When found, it just so happens that Galen's voice and appearance greatly resembled that of a young Elvis. People believed he was Elvis returned, positing that Elvis never really died. Galen even ends up believing he is Elvis and finds happiness on Earth with a woman named Gertrude and her son Tony. Warlock finds Galen and offers to turn him back into his form of Galactus, but Galen is actually so happy he chooses to remain on Earth and continue living as Earth's Elvis replacement, basically. It's a great story.
Stan Lee and the original Marvel bullpen as the Fantastic Four. Naturally, this issue poses the question, what if the original Marvel bullpen had become the Fantastic Four? And what we see is a version of Mr. Fantastic with the likeness of Stan Lee, which is just so fun and bizarre. Jack Kirby, Flo Steinberg, and Saul Brodsky also appear as the other three, and they have themselves a fun, very original adventure as the popular titular heroes. Unfortunately, this issue apparently has some pretty sexist overtones, mostly aimed at Steinberg, which makes the Marvel creators come off as sort of unlikable, especially by today's standards. But regardless, it's a lot of fun to see the people behind the scenes of many of our favorite comics in the forefront of this unique issue of What If.
Number 1, Sheep Boy. When it comes to characters that really stick out to me in the world of Marvel What If, I gotta say a lot of them come from the funny little bits of the comics that aren't even full issues. Because I mean, come on, they're so wonderfully ridiculous. One such example at one such point, I guess, is the notorious Sheep Boy. Sheep Boy made his first appearance in What If issue 100. He was created by Jim Chung and is the reimagined version of Spider-Man. Basically, what if Peter Parker had been bit by a radioactive sheep instead? What would we get? Sheep Boy, which would really make for an interesting clone saga when it comes to figuring out the cloning process. Because, aren't we like all about sheeps when it comes to cloning? Actually, I think that through cloning sheep we actually learned that cloning humans would be ill-advised. So maybe there'd be no more clones in the Marvel Universe if it started with sheep. No more clone sagas after that. I don't know if that would be good or bad. Depends on how much you like or dislike clones, I guess.
Number 10. What if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four? Okay, I have to start with this one as it's the very first issue of What If, released back in the late 70s. Now the Watcher breaks it down how these things work, how these what ifs work, as he will in the Disney Plus original this summer with the smooth voice of Jeffrey Wright to accompany the beautiful animation. Now he explains to readers in all of these issues that there are multiple realities. And the first one we get to explore is where Peter joins the first family to make some dough. And yes, of course, they call themselves the Fantastic Five. Because 4 plus 1 is 5. See, we're alright here, we're pretty good. The Bugle doesn't hate on Peter, he's actually loved and respected in this story, and it's a good start for the web slinger on this long what if journey, but it's about to get so much more dark. Number 9. What if Spider-Man had rescued Gwen Stacy? Now issue 24 starts getting into the darker, but also kind of positive notes. See, instead of Spider-Man not catching Gwen with his webs, he ended up jumping off the bridge himself to rescue her, and then after that, well, love is in the air. She's alive. Things are obviously much more positive. He proposes, he reveals his identity to her. Things are looking quite nice. They're so good. And on top of that, Harry and Norman reunite. Harry found out about his father's secret identity and put his life on the line in order to save his father. So they worked it out as well. So far it's like yes and yes. So far so good. Now when Peter and Gwen get married at the ceremony, they're doing the cha-cha slide, drinking some champagne, having a great time, and then J. Jonah Jameson just waltz in with a bunch of police officers with footage that reveals Peter Parker as Spider-Man. Also, what a dick. Like, that day? Do it tomorrow. Do it the day before. I don't know. The wedding? Not nice. Now this was the same tape that brought Norman and his father together, and it's the same tape that made Peter have to run for the rest of his life to protect the ones that he loves. It starts good, ends bad. Classic Peter. Number 8. What if Uncle Ben had lived? Okay, still in volume 1, now in issue 46, we see another positive scenario unfold, or rather it starts that way. Yeah. So Uncle Ben didn't suffer from back pain in the storyline, or sciatica or anything like that. He just slept comfortably that fateful night, which is great, but some things still have to happen. So instead of him going downstairs to check on that noise, it was Aunt May. So Aunt May ended up biting the bullet instead, and this changed the dynamic for Peter and Uncle Ben. I mean, obviously. See, Uncle Ben and Peter were quiet. Peter was for sure closer to May before she died, and when Ben figured out that Peter was Spider-Man, he actually encouraged him to continue and be there for the helpless, rather than, just doing it out of some tortured sense of misplaced responsibility. So Spider-Man becomes better and more confident, which is a great sign. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it does wonders for our channel over here at Top 10 Nerd. Thank you so much for your constant support. Let's get right back into this list. I don't want to waste any more of your precious time, although I'm still doing so. Let's go back in. Number 7, what if Spider-Man had kept his 6 arms? Okay, what if volume 2 issue 42? We're getting into the weirder what ifs now, and it shows us what the world would look like when Spider-Man from Earth 92-100 keeps his extra 4 arms. Now the trick to this problem originally was in Michael Morbius's blood, but in this what if, it shows us that Morbius never actually made it to Dr. Connor's lab. Instead, Peter just stuck with these arms. He had no choice. Now eventually he tries to figure out something. He goes to the Xavier mansion for help. They all attack him because, they don't recognize him. He has 6 arms and he's aggressive and upset. So Peter leaves them too. He's like, damn. So now he's bummed about this mutation even more, but he's easily able to stop Dr. Octopus. So that's, that's a nice positive out of all this. Now things finally get easier for Peter when Mr. Fantastic surprises Spider-Man with Electro Vibra arms that will make his extra arms invisible, so he can at least blend in. That's progress, that's fair. Number 6. What if Spider-Man had kept his cosmic powers? Okay, in my last video I talked about these alternate powerful versions of Spider-Man, and amongst them was this Captain Universe version. So Spider-Man doesn't have these powers for too long, but in What If Volume 2 issue 31 we see a world where he remained the most powerful being. Now he starts off retiring. I mean, first of all, he wants a normal life. So Venom, of course, knows that he cannot beat this cosmic Spider-Man no matter what, so he agrees. He agrees to take over for the Webhead after his retirement. So far, this is pretty wild. Peter enjoys retirement for a little bit, but in the end, he still feels like he has to help humanity. Now, at one point, he tries to demand Thor to make it rain to fix famine in all these drought-ridden lands, but Thor refuses as his oath doesn't allow him to do such things. They end up having a cosmic battle in space. Spider-Man literally punches him off the planet to start it off, and it's wild. They're both so powerful. Now finally Dr. Doom shows up. Well, we think it's Dr. Doom, but it's actually a Doombot. So the Doombot shows up offering to help get rid of Pete's problem, and it works. It works so well, in fact, that the spider powers leave too, and Peter is finally able to retire and have a daughter with MJ. Now at the very end, they look into her eyes, and they're all white. So MJ jokes and says, oh, she's got her father's eyes. How lovely. Now she's a god that you have to deal with. Enjoy.
Number 5, Marvel Zombies Resurrection. While not an exact what if series, Marvel Zombies Resurrection definitely feels like a what if version of the Marvel Zombies world that imagines a completely new scenario involving zombies based on established Marvel lore, where Galactus becomes infected with a mysterious new virus that it turns out was created by the Brood, dun dun dun, to infect people more efficiently, turning them instead into zombies. The whole series from 2020 and the intro to it from 2019 that kind of explains all of the lore that you need to know to jump in is all pretty bleak, with only a few people on Earth making it out alive in the end, and still fighting basically just to survive after the world has pretty much been completely infected after Galactus's corpse is hurled to the Earth to be used as a kind of zombie creating bomb. But while the story is pretty dark in terms of all the great heroes that we lose, do not worry. At least Carol's Flirkin cat Chewie stays safe. Thank goodness. In case like me you read this and you were worried the whole time about that little fur baby, I was like, no, please don't let Chewie die, Chewie's so cute. Chewie is also a badass, so really there's no need to worry. Chewie's like one of the best fighters in this entire series, which I love. Number 4. What if Clint Barton killed Norman Osborn during Dark Reign? This what if comes answered in the What If Dark Reign one-shot. Here we get to see what could have happened had Clint Barton's plan to kill Norman Osborn actually come together. Clint himself ends up making a martyr out of Osborn though, unfortunately, and becomes a wanted man in the process. One civilian decides to take the matter of justice into his own hands, calling out the assassin, Clint Francis Barton. And if he doesn't show himself, he threatens to blow up the entire Sunday Inn and all the innocent people that are inside it. Hawkeye does show up though and attempts to talk the man down, but surprisingly the man pulls a gun and shoots Clint point blank to death rather than surrender. He is taken away, and in the end Hammer remains in control under Deputy Director, likely now full director actually, Victoria Hand. Basically, if Hawkeye had actually killed Norman Osborn, it would be bad, I think, in the long run. I think that's what we learned. Number 3. What if the Kingdom of Kane? In What If issue 94 out of the 1989 series, also known as Volume 2, we get to visit a world destroyed by the Sentinels. Oh goody. The Sentinels did not only take out all of mutant kind supposedly, but also killed all of Earth's mightiest heroes besides, and its general population of non-powered individuals who were killed by high levels of radiation that the Sentinels emitted. The only one to survive all this destruction is Juggernaut, who wanders the Earth for years reminiscing on his past and all of his wrongdoings, and feeling unbearably lonely all the while. Poor Juggernaut. Magneto shows up and confirms that everything that has come to pass is Juggernaut's fault because he killed Professor X, which was basically the catalyst event for this chain reaction of destruction that has now come to pass. Juggernaut finds and kind of falls into a secret bunker as a result of his fight with Magneto, where he learns that some mutants survived and are actually hiding out. Yay! When they ask him to leave them be though, he refuses, only to learn that this was an attempt to protect themselves against the radiation, which he is now let in by breaking into the bunker, infecting them and ultimately sentencing them to death. So it's really sad. Juggernaut's like, I'm lonely, I just want to talk to you, and they're just like, you just killed us, so thanks for that. He's like, wow. I ruin everything, this is terrible. Number 2. What If the Traitor? In this alternate tale that comes to us from the 1989 volume of What If issue -1, we get to see what would happen if Trevor Fitzroy went back in time to try and convince Professor X to never create the X-Men. Although Bishop travels back in time to try and stop Fitzroy, it doesn't end up working out. Fitzroy shows the Professor of the future to come and all the war and prosecution that mutants will suffer. When Professor X meets Bishop, he inquires of Jean's fate and learns that she perishes, but that he and his X-Men remain a symbol of hope for the people. Unable to accept the dark future that awaits, however, Professor X seemingly agrees, despite Bishop's pleas, to never let the X-Men form, and Bishop ends up being locked up in prison in the past, with both Fitzroy and Bishop believing the other is the traitor. But who's really the traitor? Number 1. What if Spider-Man Back in Black? This story reimagines what would have happened had MJ ended up being shot by the Kingpin's hitman instead of Aunt May. Mary Jane as such does not end up in intensive care hanging to life by a thread, but instead dies pretty much instantly. This makes Peter lose control, going into a dark rage unlike any we've ever seen. He doesn't just plan on scaring and potentially finishing the Kingpin if MJ dies, because I mean she's already dead, but instead he plans on just straight up setting out to kill whoever was responsible for the hit, which he of course does find out was still Kingpin in this reality. Donning his black costume, he heads out planning to put an end to Kingpin once and for all, despite Aunt May and Iron Man trying to stop him and calm him down. In the end, Peter succeeds in killing Kingpin, Aunt May basically disowns him, and Iron Man has him arrested for murder, citing the Superhero Registration Act. Peter blames Iron Man for all this mess, by the way, demanding a trial with a jury, and Iron Man denies any wrongdoing, claiming Peter made his choice. Number 10. What if Spider-Man had never become a crime fighter? What else would Spidey get up to? Well, in the long run, he basically ends up as a kind of television personality, an actor, and a producer. Spider-Man makes movies that he stars in as an action hero, but still keeps his identity a secret. In the end, he works toward promoting other vigilantes through films that he produces, and still ends up getting involved in crime fighting of sorts. A ton of villains villains in the form of the Sinister Six end up fighting against him. Well, really they end up fighting against Daredevil, and then Spider-Man's like, Daredevil, help me. But in the end, he's like, I gotta help because Daredevil's just one guy, and he doesn't really have superpowers in the same way that Spider-Man does. Included in this Sinister Six team-up is J. Jonah Jameson, who blames Spider-Man for the destruction of his life and his paper. In the end, Spider-Man realizes that he really mucked up by using his powers for gain instead of for good, which, fair. But he did have a really sweet cape, so there is that. Number 9. What if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four? The story that started it all off. What if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four is what if that in theory doesn't really sound too crazy until you realize what happens as a result. Spider-Man initially attempted to impress the FF by breaking into the Baxter building to show off his skills and strength. This happened way back when in the original comics. However, in the main continuity reality, they weren't too impressed by his antics and initially denied him entry to the team. In this version of the story, however, Sue Storm feels compelled to give Spidey a chance and help make it work so that he can pay his and Aunt May's bills while also acting as a hero within the team. However, she later becomes jealous when she is left behind on a mission and Spider-Man gets to go, which, I mean, fair enough. Sue's like, hello, I'm here too. In the end, this causes her to run into the arms of Namor, who she then joins, leaving Reed Richards, and with Spider-Man taking her place on the team. Sue is also transformed into an Atlantean by a device Namor created just for this purpose, in case I guess it one day happened that Sue wanted to join him and become an Atlantean, and she can no longer as a result breathe oxygen. I just love how this story ends. I feel like it's kind of random, but it's also kind of great. I just ship Sue and Namor so much, that's the problem here. I'm into it. I'm like, yes, Sue, be Namor's conscience. Rule the underwater kingdom. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it and more what if videos, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also, we got a what if playlist, so go click the playlist wherever it is on the screen. I don't know, is it here? Is it somewhere? Click it. Number 8. What if Thanos joined the Avengers? Just even saying this title feels weird. This one comes to us from the one-shot What If Infinity Thanos. In this story, Thanos ends up joining and being accepted into the Avengers while they face off with the Builders. He and the team succeeded in defeating their enemy, but at great cost, losing Captain America along the way. In a shocking twist of events, even more shocking than Thanos becoming an Avenger in my opinion, he also ends up taking up Cap's shield after he dies in battle, and almost seems to mourn his loss? It's a weird one, but if you want to see Thanos rub shoulders with Thor and Captain Marvel, then this is definitely the story for you. Number 7. What if you were Spider-Man? This is one of those very short stories that is summed up within basically a page, or in this case, 2 pages. 2 panels. Here, the what if question posed is what if you, yourself, were Spider-Man? I mean, if I were Spider-Man, I would probably carry my partner a little more securely while swinging around town, and I'd try to be a little kinder to myself when it came to all the self-guilt and blame that we usually see Spider-Man feeling over all of his failings. I'd definitely be doing weekly therapy sessions if I were Spider-Man. But don't think too hard about what you do differently or the same as Peter Parker, because the end to this what if is pretty hilarious and dark all at once. Because you are then greeted with a panel featuring a tombstone that says, "Here lies Spider-Man," where there is also a little space for you to fill in your name, and a bunch of villains surrounding it. Because of course, none of us average Joes could make it as Spidey. Har har. But also, it's probably true. I don't think I could actually make it as Spidey. Although we would have powers, right? I guess if we didn't have powers, we'd really be screwed though. Number 6. What if Helen Taylor had become Nova? This story takes place in the pages of issue 15 from Marvel's first What If volume, beginning in 1977. Here we get a few stories involving alternate characters taking up the mantle of Nova. One such character is a woman named Helen Taylor, who is basically a random civilian, redhead, and a wife. Or should I say a widow? She gets the power of Nova just after her husband is murdered in the streets in front of her after a mugging gone wrong. Helen swears to use her newfound power to get revenge, believing the powers are kind of an answer to her plea for some way to extract vengeance on the murderer, who we know as Willie DeBrow, or Willie DeBro, depending on how you want to say that. Nova sets off shaking down every criminal joint she can find in the city and making quick work of the Kingpin along her way to boot. The Fantastic Four manage to stop her and capture her to find out exactly what her powers are and where they came from and sort of why she's doing all this. And while this is going on, we learn that months ago, Willie perished in a car accident and has been dead ever since. What a twist. And if you're like months ago, does that make sense? Yes, this story takes place over the course of months. I actually went back to look for that because I was like, that's so crazy, it's such a long period of time. A long period of time and only a few pages.
Number 5. What if the Avengers had never been? Now, with all of these multiverse stories beginning in the MCU, it feels like the Avengers have never been further apart. It's exciting, but also a little concerning. This What If was actually the first What If issue with a major death, just 3 issues in. They're going for it. So we start off with the Hulk, and instead of smashing and hitting, he's dashing and quitting. He wants nothing to do with the team. So Rick Jones is sent to look for the Green Goliath, but he ends up being held hostage, where Tony Stark has to now come to the rescue. Now they make it back to the mansion, but Namor and Hulk want more. They challenge Earth's mightiest to the fight for their lives. Now Iron Man makes suits for Hank, Jan, and Rick, but they can't control the suits. It's too much for them, so they stay in retirement. So Stark powers up his own suit to the max, and then some more, so it's a lot of power going on, almost unobtainable. But then when the rest of the team finally do show up to the battle in Stark's other suits, Hank takes a hard hit. So Tony has to then transfer his suit's energy, that fat energy, in order to keep Hank alive. So even in this What If, Tony still throws his life down for others. How sweet. Number 4. What if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? In this reality, Professor X is the one who becomes Juggernaut and gets buried in the Temple of Sidorak. Now this caused him to go down a completely different path when it comes to the X-Men, because after this, well, he never created the X-Men, so now the Fantastic Four has to go against Magneto. So after Professor X Juggernaut head digs his way out, he discovers his telepathy was now much stronger with the added powers. What a treat. I mean, not really. He ends up taking over the country with his own X-Men posse to enforce these anti-human laws. Cyclops even sides with Magneto at this point because he's like, okay, at least this guy can block Xavier's telepathy. And it all comes down to this final confrontation with Cyclops and Xavier. They're battling it out on Asteroid M, and Cyclops is trying to remind Xavier about the vision, the original dream, with humans and mutants living together in perfect harmony. Doesn't that sound lovely? And then before we could really consider it, the ground beneath him exploded and he got launched into space forever. Oof! Number 3. What if Loki had found the hammer of Thor? The final issue of Volume 1 of What If, again, something we're kind of close to seeing in the MCU, especially with Loki Season 2 being confirmed. These timelines are about to be really enjoyable, and we might get a hint of this, I think. So Donald Blake ends up not finding the hammer because Loki tossed it into the woods, and then the Saturnians wiped out Donald. So Thor wakes up in the land of the dead, memory not included. This is all bad for Thor. It's not so much Loki using the hammer, he just alters the hammer's location, and then Thor's altered future is now a stressful one. Number 2. What if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four? Okay, with John Watts directing the newest Spider-Man trilogy for the MCU and the upcoming MCU Fantastic Four reboot, this next What If might not seem that impossible. The first ever issue of What If finds Pete with a number 5 on his chest. The Fantastic Five has a ring to it. I kind of love the idea already. So Pete was low on cash, so he figured, you know what, I'm gonna break into the Baxter building and straight up force an audition for Marvel's First Family. So Sue recruits Peter and the team is formidable. They're great, they're solid. They're so good that Sue doesn't even feel like there's a need for her on the team anymore. There's always something sad. Don't do it, Sue. She ends up choosing Namor as her other half, even joining him in his kingdom under the sea. Now she did love Reed as well, but her departure from the team just made it work better with a fishy guy. Now if you want to see more of that altered storyline, because it is quite intriguing, jump ahead 20 issues once you're done this epic kickoff. And finally, coming in at number 1, what if somebody else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider? This is perhaps one of my favorite what ifs because I genuinely have thought about what would happen if I was Spider-Man. I work for Top 10 Nerd, of course I'm going to daydream about this. Thing is though, I'm afraid of heights, so it wouldn't exactly be smooth sailing. But I can dream, right? Even in the Marvel Universe, other big names can't handle the webs. In this What If, we see Flash Thompson, Betty Brant, and John Jameson each get a swing at the sticky life. So Flash gets bit and then he decides to take a crack at professional wrestling with the new muscles and all. Now he may have underestimated his strength because he kind of accidentally killed the guy. You should have tapped. Oops. Next up, Betty Brant gets bit, and I have to admit her costume is for sure the most stylish. Very good, makes for great Instagram posts, sure. But when she runs out of web fluid making TikToks, the thief who took Uncle Ben's life was easily able to get away. She was like... And finally we see John Jameson's turn, and he goes out like a hero. He tries to stop a space shuttle from crashing, and it's a lot harder than it looks. If you're not Pete, just don't even try, honestly.
Professor X as Juggernaut. In What If number 13, the question is posed, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? And the answer is, It would make Ben Ball feel uncomfortable. This matchup is maybe a little tough to justify for this list since it's about superheroes, and in this story Professor X, or not, does enlist all of the mutants to take over the world, but it's still Professor X in there somewhere, and it's arguable that he may have been turned from good to evil by the influence of the Sidorak gem. I just had to put this strange character on the list because I think it's such a weird combination to even consider, let alone craft a whole issue around. Look at him. Chonky, fully mobile Professor X. When he puts the helmet on, things are less weird though, but it's still one for the list.
Number 9. Wolverwimp. Wolverwimp is an alternate version of Wolverine who, instead of having an adamantium skeleton, has a styrofoam one. He appears in one of the joke covers included in issue 100 of What If. This poor version of Wolverine is threatened by a little girl who is a female child version of Magneto. Yeah, it's weird. While Wolverine is fearsome and tends to fight for what he believes in no matter the odds, it seems that Wolverwimp is all too ready to shy away from a fight as he's terrified of a conflict. Honestly, I really can't blame the poor guy. He is a styrofoam skeleton, so yeah. I don't even know how you'd walk around with that, never mind trying to be a hero and like stand up to bad guys. Probably just like crumple over.
Frog Thor, or Throg. There's not much more to it than that. The question posed in this issue is, what if the X-Men had stayed in Asgard? It really has nothing to do with Frog Thor, but he makes an epic appearance nonetheless. The transformation actually takes place in Thor number 363 and is revisited in this What If issue. If you don't already know, or couldn't already have guessed, Thor's slimy amphibian form comes at the hands of his brother Loki. What makes this moment great in What If number 12 though is that Storm is forced to face off against Frog Thor, with the stakes being the prosperity of all of Asgard. Luckily, she wins the fight and Frog Thor is turned back into regular Thor. Although, is that really a win? I liked Frog Thor. If you want to see more of Throg, you can catch him in another storyline as well, where a shard of Thor's hammer is actually picked up by a frog, turning it into a pretty powerful little dude. I just thought that was worth mentioning as well. Frog Thor.
Number 7. Joshua Guthrie and Unit Jim 211131. This is actually a pretty sad story, but one that is also kind of silly. It's basically reminiscent of the Iron Giant. Remember the Iron Giant? Remember all the tears that we cried? Except instead of any old giant robot, we have a Sentinel. Unit Jim 211131. This Sentinel is found by Josh Guthrie, little sibling to Husk and Cannonball, who never has his mutant powers manifest. In this world anyways. On our 616, Josh ends up getting wings and musical mutant abilities, going by the codename Icarus. Here, however, he just gets a Sentinel, who has broken programming and instead believes his prime directive is basically to protect and serve Josh. However, he still remembers that mutants are a threat, and when he meets Paige and Sam Guthrie, ends up battling against them, while painted up like an X-Men. Josh's idea, because he wanted to prove that he and his robot were basically a better team than the X-Men ever could be. Oh boy. Paige and Sam end up beaten by the Sentinel, but just as it's about to terminate the defeated mutants, oh no! Josh steps in to protect his siblings. He says that the Sentinel can't kill them without killing him as well. As such, the robot realizes it is the main threat to Josh and decides to terminate itself instead in order to protect him, because that's its prime directive at this point. Sure, Sentinels are kind of villains, but in this story, in a roundabout way, Unit Jim 211131 is actually kind of the hero. Although he threatens Paige and Sam and Josh, he also ends up saving them from himself. I don't know why I made the Sentinel a he, but the Sentinel's a he now, because I'm not going to go back. I gave the Sentinel a gender, I hope that's okay. Josh mourns the loss of his robo friend, and it is ultra sad. Just like Iron Giant.
Thanos Captain America. In What If Infinity Thanos, the question is posed, what if Thanos joined the Avengers? And the result is this really strange depiction of Thanos wearing a Captain America suit. What goes on in this storyline is that Thanos joins up with the Avengers to fight the Builders, and he doesn't even try to take over the world, or try and kill half the population, or anything like that. That is until Captain America is killed and Thanos takes over for him. Because then he decides it's time to start taking over stuff again. After he helps the Avengers destroy the Builders with a swift battle, he goes back to his classic Thanos self and makes it his duty to take on Cap's old position as leader, and then quickly makes it his duty as well to lead the Avengers and the rest of the heroes of Earth into war with the rest of the universe. So yeah, he doesn't take over Earth, but he seems to be ready to help them take over other worlds alongside him. Fair compromise? I guess so. Either way, the cover of this issue just feels so weird, and I felt that Captain America Thanos needed to make an appearance on this list.
Alright, number 10, Batmite. If you've heard of the extremely weirdly named Mr. Mxyzptlk, then you have a small understanding of the reality warping imps who inhabit the 5th dimension. This Batman megafan is basically a small childlike imp who wears a loosely fitting homemade bat suit with a black lightning bolt symbol. But don't let his goofy looks trick you. He has nearly limitless magical abilities. He's not technically a hero, but he's also definitely not strictly a villain. A being of this level of power can't really be either because there's no way it would lose in whatever it wanted to do. He idolizes Batman and just wants to see him in action. So when Batman gets angry with him for being a nuisance, he usually sets things straight and just leaves, which is honestly kind of adorable. Number 9. Dino Cop. We have a few anthropomorphized characters on this list, but none of the others are dinosaurs. Dino Cop is from Earth 41, which is an Earth containing characters who are all pastiches of heroes from Image Comics. He is Rex Stegman, a humanoid dinosaur-like character who is also a police officer, supposed to be the DC equivalent to Savage Dragon. He is absolutely dedicated to preserving the peace in his undinosaur blue-collar worker way. He teams up with another superhero from Earth 41, Spore, who is supposed to be like Spawn, but more planty. I don't think his powers really matter too much when we talk about the weirdness of this character, but they are super strength. That's kind of it. He has increased stamina and is kind of pretty intelligent, but you know, nothing super. I think a dinosaur man hybrid police officer is weird enough to make this list on his own, so there you go. Number 8, the Magic Lantern. So take Shaggy from Scooby-Doo and give him the powers of Green Lantern and you've got the Magic Lantern of Earth 47. When it's groovy, when it's grim, we hum the living guru's hymn. When other lanterns lose their shit, we keep the Magic Lantern lit. I'm sure it's not the only thing that's lit. I wish I could just make this point a bunch of the stoner Green Lantern quotes. Hostility is for squares. Get with the blueprint. Are we groovy? Or do I gotta kick your non-Euclidean alien butts into the galaxy next door? The Magic Lantern is the Green Lantern to the Earth 47 Justice League, known as the Love Syndicate, whose members include Sunshine Superman, Shooting Star instead of Batman, Speed Freak, Brother Power, and the Geek. And they first appeared in Animal Man number 23, and were expanded upon in the Multiversity Guidebook. And every time I see them, I just wanna be a part of it. Number 7, Danny the Street. Yeah, no, I think this is the wildest concept for a hero I have ever heard of. In case you didn't clue in, or for that matter, actually didn't believe it, Danny the Street is a living sentient street who can teleport to any city in the world. He was first introduced in Doom Patrol Volume 2, number 35 in 1990, and his main purpose and drive in this world is to bring happiness to those who inhabit whatever city he is currently at, giving those who have nowhere to go a place to rest their heads. It's nice. He likes to cross-dress and dress himself in nice pink frilly decorations on some of his buildings, including weapon stores. He eventually became the headquarters of Doom Patrol. At one point, he grew to be Danny the World, and then he was deconstructed down to just Danny the Brick, and was even just the humble Danny the Alley at one point. Even saying that sentence makes me feel like, what am I doing with my life? I'm talking about awesome sentient streets. Mom would be proud. Number 6. David Dibble. David Dibble dibble-dabbled in some kind of dubious scientific debauchery which decidedly turned him into Dig Dabby. Turned him into Big Baby, otherwise known as Behemoth. Hailing from Earth 8, where there are characters that seem to be DC's parody for Marvel characters. As part of the Retaliators, genius alternate name for the Avengers, Behemoth is basically the Hulk, turning from a scientist into an extremely strong monster. Only the unfortunately named David Dibble, instead of turning into a green savage beast, turns into a giant blue mega baby. While he used to have a dumbed down intelligence when transformed, he has managed to recover his intelligence over time, just like how Marvel's Green Goliath did the same. The baby part of this is probably the strangest part, but it does reflect how Hulk basically acts like a tantruming toddler when he transforms.
Number 5, Elseworld's finest, Supergirl/Batgirl. You can't go wrong with a jacked Joker when it comes to weird multiversal stories. Looking real jacked, baby! Elseworld's finest is weird but also kind of cool. It focuses on Barbara Gordon and Kara Zor-El, Batgirl and Supergirl respectively, who are guardians of Gotham and Metropolis, as in this world, there was never a Batman or a Superman. The two of them team up to take on the manipulative and traitorous Lex Luthor, and as I said, a really swole version of the Joker. It's a strange one, but it's also kind of a great one. Number 4. Batman / the Demon, a tragedy. In this Elseworld story, we get to explore a horrifying fantastical world where magic exists. Here, Bruce Wayne is not the Batman, instead suffering from an allergy to moonlight. He is a restless sleeper, and it turns out this is because he's actually bonded to the demon Etrigan. Oh my goodness. It takes Bruce a while to figure this out though, but in the end, he is too late to save his girlfriend Glenda. Poor Glenda. The best thing he can do according to Merlin is to wipe his memory, which will also mean he has no recollection of Glenda. Oh no. Merlin claims that this will save her. Unfortunately, it doesn't, as Etrigan taking over Bruce in the nighttime does end up still killing her. But hey, at least Bruce doesn't remember her, which actually seems to have been Merlin's plan all along. You see, in order to keep the demon trapped within Bruce, his forgetfulness is necessary. There is no way to save Glenda really in any case, most likely, and Merlin was just saying that to try to get Bruce to, do what he wanted him to do. But hey, at least Bruce doesn't remember her, so at least he won't be sad about it. Number 3. Brotherhood of the Bat. Have you ever wondered to yourself what the DC universe would be like if every member of the League of Assassins was dressed up and also weirdly happened to resemble Batman? No? Me neither. But too bad, because we get to know what that would be like in this Elseworld story. I mean, not even too bad, it's kind of really great in a weird way. Brotherhood of the Bat takes place in a post-apocalyptic future where Ra's al Ghul decides that the League of Assassins, they need some new costumes. New Bat-themed costumes that all very much resemble alternative takes on Batman's outfits. Also, check out some of the notes on Ra's al Ghul's design sketches here. That is honestly my favorite part of this story. Just seeing all these, there's little notes in red. It's is this cape too much? You can never have too much cape, just so you know. Just so you know, Raish, no such thing. Number 2. Batman Nosferatu. If you want something weird in a sort of horror-based and very artistic way, we've got you. Batman Nosferatu is actually part of an Elseworld story series that delve into the German Expressionist period. This story seems to take some inspiration from Nosferatu and the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Not only is the art style very different and unique, but the whole tone and the style of the dialogue is as well. The story has a lot going on, but mainly it follows the horrors of Dr. Arkham. To give you the briefest summary ever, because as I said, there's a lot going on in this story, it's also quite long. The story mainly centers around Dr. Arkham and his experiments and creations, including one called the Laughing Man. Oh, I wonder who that's supposed to be. A reanimated creature made from various corpse parts. In the end, Bruce Wayne's son ends up dying and is resurrected as the Nosferatu, sort of cyborg monster creature who ends up taking on and defeating the Laughing Man. I wonder who Nosferatu is supposed to stand for here. Any guesses? Number 1. Batman / Lobo. Like all of the weirdest comic stories out there across the multiverse, this one also features Lobo. Here, Joker hires the mercenary to ruin Batman's reputation and then finally kill his nemesis. Lobo sets out dressed as Batman and begins to muck up the streets, killing Batman's villains in gruesome ways to make sure that people know that Batman is no hero. He's like, what, does Batman have a no-kill policy? Pfft, not anymore. Also, the deaths have to be gruesome because this is a Lobo comic after all, so yeah, they're all pretty... There's something. I don't even know if we can show them here. In the end, the Joker is forced to call off Lobo after it's revealed that Batman is actually his long-lost twin brother, Bruce Wayne. You see, Joey and Bruce were apparently separated at a young age. I mean, does it get any weirder than this?
Number 10. Batman vs. Bigby. You know Batman, but have you ever read or heard of the Fables series? It's one of my favorite comic series. It basically follows classic fairy tale characters living in modern day New York. The Big Bad Wolf, otherwise known as Bigby Wolf, is the sheriff of their community. In 2021, we got the limited DC Black Label series Batman vs. Bigby, A Wolf in Gotham, which is a collaboration between these two comic worlds, with Bigby as a main suspect for murders in Gotham. If you like the Fables world and you like Batman, you'll love this little mashup. Number 9. JSA, The Liberty Files. The Justice Society of America, The Liberty Files, is a DC Elseworld story from 2000 to 2003, which makes it non-canonical. Any story that lets writers go outside the rules of the DC canon always makes for stories that I personally love. Alright, so what's it about? The series took characters from the JSA, but turned them into covert government operatives in World War II. Specifically, the story centered on 3 heroes: Batman, called Bat, Hour Man, called Clock, and Dr. Midnight, called Owl. I know, really creative names. The three were known as the Unholy Three, and their mission, at least in the Part 1 story, is to find Jack the Grin, who is the Joker, who has information about the German weapon Übermensch, or Superman. Are you sold yet? Number 8, Earth 15. Earth 15 first appeared in 2007 in Countdown number 30. This Earth was basically a perfected Earth with heroes who evolved to become nearly perfect beings, with most of the proteges like Jason Todd, Donna Troy, Zod, and Kyle Rayner taking over the original heroes' roles. That is, until the events of Flashpoint, when it was destroyed by the crazed Superboy Prime. That little rascal. The still existing dimension became a graveyard universe, eventually being modified by Hal Jordan into an Earth whose heroes had personalities opposite to the Prime Earth versions. It's an interesting place for sure, and some interesting things have happened in it. Check it out. Before we go on to number 7, I got something to tell you. You're great. You guys keep hitting that like and subscribe button, you're making me blush, my goodness. Keep up that support, it helps us bust out more and more of these videos for you lovely people. Alright, moving on. Number 7, Earth 20. Earth 20, which appeared in Final Crisis Superman Beyond number 1 in 2008, is the home of Kent Nelson, otherwise known as Doc Fate. And he is so cool. Basically, he leads the Society of Superheroes on Earth 20, which is a group that includes Lady Blackhawk, Immortal Man, the Green Lantern, the Mighty Atom, and Batman from time to time. The history of this world isn't exactly very well known, but we do know it has just come out of a war that is somewhat like World War II. There are Zeppelins flying around in some cities, and the cars are all big and beautiful. It's got a very slick 20s style. The heroes of this world would do righteous battle against a society of supervillains from Earth 40 and a huge 5-year war. My goodness. Number 6, Batman White Knight. I cannot recommend this 2017 story enough to you guys. It is an insanely interesting and fantastic Joker story. It takes place in an alternate Gotham City, and the Joker regains his sanity after a brutal and violent forced ingestion of a medicine by Batman. The roles are practically reversed, as the seemingly reformed Joker, real name Jack Napier, becomes the White Knight, hoping to better Gotham City as a politician, while also condemning Batman as an unhinged violent vigilante. Which, I mean, it's kinda hard to argue against that point of view. He sued the GCPD for police brutality, and he worked against the 1%, who used Batman and Gotham's crime for their own financial benefit. Joker actually becomes a good guy. It's kind of insane. But there is more to this story, and I highly suggest you check it out.
Next on the list, we have Monarch 2001. Some of you will remember the comic run from the early 90s called Armageddon 2001. This showcased a future date that is not far from our own. The comic took place in the year 2030, and the world was dystopian because everything had been destroyed by a new all-powerful villain who had seemed to dismantle and destroy the Justice League. His name was Monarch, and the reason that the comic was called Armageddon 2001 was because that was the year that the Monarch decided that he was going to rise to power and take over the world. Pretty dark if you ask me. The heroes weren't able to stop him, and he was able to bring an end to everything that they knew and loved. Could a return of Monarch mark the end of the DC universe? Next on the list, we have Brainiac Finally Succeeds. See, I like Brainiac. I think he's a cool villain. He's one of the only dudes that's been able to take on Superman, and he's probably the smartest being in the universe. If not, he's definitely up there. But his motivations are just so boring. He goes from planet to planet and puts each one of them in a little jar so he can keep all their data and he can just keep learning. Like, that is the nerdiest way to be an evil doer. He's evil because he wants everything to be organized. Maybe the dude just has OCD. But he could for sure bring the end of the DC universe. If he was ever able to get past the Justice League, he would keep bottling up the universe until nothing was left. And with each passing planet, he would be getting more and more powerful. Next on the list, we got All the Top Dogs Are Gone. There is no debate about who is at the top of the ladder when it comes to the Justice League. Well, in the comic Justice League of America Destiny, we get to see what it would look like if the Dark Knight and the Man of Steel were never there to help out. And it looks like the rest of the members can't keep up with the world falling apart. So if we were to see something happen that would cause Superman and Batman to disappear, that might bring the end of the DC universe, and it would really hurt DC's stock price. Next on the list, we have Trigon Controls Darkseid. If you haven't seen the movie Justice League Dark Apocalypse, just know that I'm about to hit you with some spoilers for that movie, so if you're worried about them, you might want to skip past this point. I highly recommend watching that movie because it is amazing, but in it you have Darkseid succeed in taking out the Justice League, and then he takes over the world and continues to dominate the universe. Superman is left powerless, and years later a slapdash team of surviving heroes is put together to try and take out Darkseid. While this assault on Apokolips is taking place, Trigon escapes from Raven's mind, and he takes over Superman's body. This Trigon-Superman fusion fights Darkseid and kind of whoops his butt. This ends with Superman pushing Trigon out of his body, but Trigon later materializes in his own form and starts duking out with Darkseid, and the two of them are sucked into a boom tube that in theory killed them, but they were probably just floating around in another dimension. Now, this universe is restarted at the end of the movie because everyone is jacked up and the world is a mess, but if Trigon and Darkseid ended up in another universe and Trigon defeats Darkseid, he could take control of his body like he did Superman, and then you have a Trigon-Darkseid combo that could probably kill everything. And coming in at the #1 spot, we have Dr. Manhattan Says So. I mean, do I really need to get into too much detail about this? He might be the most powerful being in the DC universe. In a way, he is a god. If there's anyone watching who doesn't know what I'm talking about, I'll give you a brief breakdown on this cosmic force. In the comic book The Watchmen, we are introduced to Dr. Manhattan, who was just a man until an accident ripped his atoms apart. And since then, he has the power to bend matter to his will and even shape it as he sees fit. He could create life. He could destroy life. There's a comic arc where he actually is the person who made the entire DC universe. He is living energy, immortal, a god of gods. He could even turn Superman into a bed of flowers. He's not really good or evil, he just is. And if he wanted to, because he thought things needed to change or because he was just bored, he could erase and rewrite the entire universe faster than the Flash. And that would be no guesswork. It would all be with precision.
Number 10. Earth 3. The post-Flashpoint Earth 3 is similar to its pre-Flashpoint Earth, but way better. This Earth is the birthplace of evil. The mentality here isn't good versus evil, it's more like just evil. Strength is respected more than anything else, with the weak basically being annihilated. Instead of the Justice League, Earth 3 is home to the Crime Syndicate of America, whose members include Ultraman, Superwoman, Owlman, Power Ring, Johnny Quick, Sea King, The Outsider, Grid, and John Johns. Earth 3 was reintroduced in 2013 and has played a part in Darkseid War in 2015, Dark Knight's Death Metal in 2020, and in 2021 it was reborn again in the Infinite Frontier story. Like I said, when we started, the DC universe is complicated, but what's remained the same since 2013 is that some of the coolest stories come out of Earth 3. Number 9, Earth 1. Earth 1 and the number 10 pick are probably the oldest of the Earths and universes on this list. Earth 1 first appeared in 2008 in its New 52 form, but it introduced a whole spectrum of readers into the DC universe, and sales for its comics were through the roof. So I believe it deserves a spot on the list. Here, superheroes are all younger, and they all just started their superhero careers. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Teen Titans, and Green Lantern all have graphic novels that take place on this Earth, and they are all just fresher takes on the almost overdone superhero origin stories. With the characters all being younger, it was also very easy for younger readers to relate to, and gave the characters conflicts that they wouldn't have faced as their prime Earth counterparts. Number 8. Injustice Universe. The Injustice Universe of Earth 22 is the universe in which the events of the Injustice video game and its related comics take place, and it first popped up in 2013. So here in the Injustice world, Superman went a little bonkers. After the Joker tricked Supes into killing both Lois Lane and her unborn child, plus unintentionally blowing up Metropolis, Superman murdered the Joker and eventually became a tyrannical ruler of Earth. The Batman of Injustice creates an insurgency, eventually enlisting the aid of another Earth, Earth 1 of this reality. With the alternate Earth's help, he overthrew Superman's regime and rebuilt the world. And that's all just part of the first game. Number 7. The 53rd World. The 53rd World, named by the smart primates who live there, was a world unknown to the rest of the multiverse. It's set in a near future where presumably the world is inhabited by super smart apes, like Planet of the Apes style. Oh, and also, immortality was achieved in 2067, meaning that yes, all these ultra smart apes are immortal. We know that there exists alternate ape versions of Superman, Batman, the Atom, and Aquaman. The existence of this Earth was first revealed in 2018's Dark Knight's Rising: The Wild Hunt, when Detective Chimp was beginning to lose his intelligence. The ape heroes show up, recruited by Raven, Cyborg, and the Flash to help with the dark multiverse, saying they were here to help. Obviously. Detective Chimp, accompanied by the apes of the 53rd Earth, plus Flash, Cyborg, and Raven, go to help Earth Zero's Justice League fight the dark multiverse forces. That's kind of all we know about the 53rd Earth. I want more super apes! Number 6. Archive of Worlds. The Archive of Worlds isn't so much an alternate Earth, it's actually an artificial multiverse which contains pocket dimensions in the form of film reels. Now that's just kinda nuts on its own, but then take into account the fact that it was created by a mad god, dceu, who is the god of tales, who is jealous of the new god of tales, which is the internet. It's pretty nuts. He tried to steal the new god's soul and was instead encased in a Wayne Tech satellite where he created the Archive of Worlds. First appearing in Batman/Superman Volume 2, number 16 in 2021, the pocket dimensions include a world where Superman never came to be, as well as one where Batman never came to be, a world based on hell, a western world, a world based on the life of Alana Strange, and so many other unnamed worlds. Auteur.io eventually was cured by Batman, and he instead became Observer.io, which is a lot nicer.
Number 5. Superman at Earth's End. I don't even know where to begin with this comic. Oh boy. Okay, so Superman here is one of the first iterations of course, the old man heroes to come that we've come to love so much. See, before there was Old Man Logan, there was Old Man Supes. In this Elseworld story, we are in a post-apocalyptic future where machines rule supreme and mutants basically run amok. Also, there is an army of Batmen and vicious biker gangs because, I mean, why not? The year, I believe, is 2102, so possibly this is what we'll be dealing with in just over 80 years' time. Honestly, the way things are going, I could maybe see that being our future. Superman is recharging and recuperating his strength when he hears about the plan to nuke Gotham City. He aims to save the city, but of course without doing any killing, because you know, he's Superman. And of course, no guns, because he's Superman. Except for the part where he uses guns to kill people. Except for that part. Mostly robo and really bad people though, so I guess for Supes it doesn't count. It features the famous "I am a man" memeable moment, which actually was shouted in response to an android, by the way, so out of context it's really weird, but within context it actually like kinda makes some sense. It's still pretty weird, but it's not as weird. Also, shortly after claiming that he doesn't need weapons, Superman chooses to wield a ridiculous mega gun known as the Expunger. It's crazy. I just love that he's like, I don't need weapons because I have powers. I would never do that. And then like flip to like 2 pages later and he's like, look at this giant expunger. I'm gonna use this mega gun. Number 4. All-Star Batman and Robin. Not so much a story as a full series, but I have other full series on this list, so it's fine. All-Star Batman and Robin consists of 10 issues, all of which are pretty weird when it comes to the depiction and characterization of a lot of our favorite superheroes, villains, and their allies even. Once again, we get a super jacked version of Joker in this comic. We also get a version of Vicky Vale who seems far more obsessed with Superman's manhood and dates with Bruce Wayne than any kind of serious reporting. And of course, then there are Batman and Robin. What a dynamic. Batman in this comic is the worst kind of hero, an entitled one. This is the version who refers to himself as the goddamn Batman and makes Dick eat rats and sleep in the Batcave initially. Because he's Batman and he can do that. He also torments Hal Jordan Green Lantern by painting himself, Robin, and the entire room and corridor yellow, and also serves and consumes yellow food and drink around him, with Batman enjoying some lemonade and Robin devouring what appears to be an all yellow ice cream cone. All-Star Batman and Robin has to be one of the weirdest multiverses out there. And every time I go back to it, I'm like, what is happening? What is this characterization? Number 3. JLA created equal. Okay, so All-Star Batman and Robin is the not so great kind of weird, but JLA created equal is just the weird kind of weird. In this 2-part Elseworld story, we get a glimpse into a world where all the men or almost all the men, were killed off by an unexpected and sudden plague. The only two left alive are Superman and Lex Luthor in this reality, and yet for all the powerful women who remain, this book sure manages to still be about the male characters within it. In Created Equal, Superman attempts to help the rest of the new, almost all-female JLA figure out a way to repopulate the Earth. I say almost because Superman's still there, so yeah. The main concern is how to ensure the survival of the human male gender, as if they made clones, with their technology and resources, they'd actually only be able to produce female ones. I guess they can't like tamper with the genes, they can't like tamper with the DNA, or I don't know how you make clones anyway, so I probably shouldn't tell other people how to do it. Eventually, Lois Lane and Clark Kent end up conceiving a son who is born and named Adam. He accidentally hugs his mother to death, and then Lex, being Lex, unleashes a plan to take control of all the young men who were created and raised on Themyscira, thanks to Adam's existence and his resilience. Also, he makes them all bald, because this is Lex Luthor, so yeah. Oh, what a weird story. Come and join me, and also I'll be bald, because you all have lovely hair and it offends me. Number 2, Batman Reptilian. Ah yes, the story of an alien baby that belongs to Killer Croc because he was influenced by aliens while inside his mother's womb, which is how he's even mutated and also makes him, like, I guess, a hybrid alien-human creation technically. In this beautiful yet bizarre story, Batman is attempting to track down whoever is killing all of his rogues. What he finds out though is that it isn't any one of the other villains, but Croc's baby that he just gave birth to. Killer Croc, of course, didn't know that he could do that. I mean, neither did we. It turns out that this is a result of him being part alien in origin, or being tampered with by aliens when he was like a fetus. The newborn babe, it turns out, just wants its mama, but for what purpose remains to be seen. Killer Croc can't nurture it, as you know, he doesn't have like the biological equipment for that. After we get through that whole slog of that's not gonna work, it's also implied that the giant alien monster baby wants Croc to mate with it, which is also thankfully out of the question when it comes to Croc's willingness, so thank goodness, because I thought this better not be where this is going, oh my goodness. Did I mention that Batman is also a huge jerk throughout this entire series? Cause yeah, this is Garth Ennis behind the writing wheel, and that is very much a thing. Which I'm not surprised by, that's kind of Ennis' whole thing, so yeah. I actually like Batman being a butt in that story more than I like him being a butt in Frank Miller's All-Star, so yeah. Number 1, Batman Last Night on Earth. This one was where the thumb came from in part 1 of this list. I had intended to actually include this story there, but then I got distracted by the Batman and Lobo crossover. Understandably so, I think, because that's also super weird. But that's fine, because it just means that Last Night on Earth gets a higher spot on this list of bizarre multiversal DC stories. Batman Last Night on Earth is a book that exists outside of the continuity and belongs to the DC Black Label line. Also, Reptilian is part of that same line, just so you know. Black Label primarily is made up of titles that are more adult in terms of their content and their themes. Here, that translates to Batman wearing a straitjacket version of his suit in a post-apocalyptic future, where Joker is just a head in a jar. They also end up fighting giant monster baby Green Lantern constructs in issue number 1, just to give you a sense of the level of weird that we're dealing with here. But it's like a fun weird. It's like a, I'd recommend this weird. I give it 2 weird thumbs up. Number 10, Speeding Bullets. Basically a multiversal DC Elseworld story that answers the question, what if Superman didn't just have powers but was also rich? That's basically what is going on here in Speeding Bullets. In this story, Superman wasn't raised by the Kents, but instead was taken in and adopted by the Waynes, and he becomes, you guessed it, Bruce Wayne. After the death of Thomas and Martha, Bruce becomes Batman, but the difference is this version of Batman has tech, money, smarts, and superpowers. Lex also becomes a mess of a villain in this world. While still being Superman's nemesis, he's also Batman's nemesis rolled into one, with an extra little dash of Penguin, just for good measure, I guess. So here we get a villain who is Lex, Joker, and the Penguin all in one. Oh goody, just what none of us necessarily wanted or needed. And yet, we got it. This also doesn't do much to enhance his motivation for villainy, which, like his identity, is also kind of all over the place. Still, the premise behind this Elseworld story is pretty cool, but unfortunately it doesn't add enough when it comes to offering a twist or different perspective to either the Superman or Batman mantle. Number 9. Batman and Captain America. A gloriously weird and awesome comic. This DC multiversal story also happens to be a DC Marvel crossover issue featuring Batman, his sidekick Robin, and Captain America and his sidekick Bucky. Both Cap and Batman end up joining together and then swapping sidekicks. Their villains also seem to have a team up as Red Skull and Joker come together, but this is also the famous issue the Joker insists that Red Skull is too evil even for him. He may be a criminal lunatic, but after all, he's an American criminal lunatic, and he can't stand by when it comes to abiding by Red Skull's history and motivations. So not only do we get to see some great team-ups, but we also get to see a full-out fight break out between these two iconic villains. Thanks, John Byrne. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love Elseworld stories and all of the weird, wacky things that go on in the multiverse when it comes to just alternate worlds, let us know by giving this video a thumbs up, and hey, maybe we can do some more Elseworlds lists for you. Cause yeah, there's lots of kooky stories out there. Number 8. The Superman Monster. Frankenstein, but make it Superman. There are lots of retellings of classic tales when we look into the realm of Elseworlds, and the story of Frankenstein is not one that is left untouched. Actually, I feel like this story gets interpreted a few times throughout the Elseworld stories. I feel like I've seen at least 3 different versions of Frankenstein retold in Elseworlds. I still have yet to see Dr. Seuss retellings though in the world of DC, which are some classic kids tales that do eke their way surprisingly into Marvel at times. In the Superman Monster, Lex Luthor takes the role of creator and Superman ends up as his monster. You might think this sounds familiar considering it's also kind of the premise for the main continuity origin story of Bizarro, but this creation, while starting out similar to Bizarro, eventually goes full-on hero and full-on Superman by the end of it. That means in this story of Frankenstein, the creator ends up the monster, while the monster ends up the hero. What a twist. Number 7. Justice Riders. Because it's an inevitability that at some point, we have to turn to the Wild West for inspiration when it comes to an Elseworld story. We've gotta go there at some point. And so we have Justice Riders. Justice Riders reimagines the DC universe as existing during the time of the Wild West and adapts the characters to kind of fit their surroundings somewhat. As such, Wonder Woman becomes a Texan-sounding sheriff, and Martian Manhunter gets to sport a poncho and a cowboy hat. Which honestly, this is one you might want to check out just for that, cause that's great. This is the Wild West, baby. There are also plenty of shootouts and bar brawls, some with cyborg enemies involved. As ridiculous as this premise is, I will say it's executed well and it also looks fantastic, so. Number 6. The Reaching Hand. Honestly, what a strange story this one is. It features Batman as an occult detective trying to solve the mystery of Elongated Man's death. Unfortunately, it seems as though Elongated Man wasn't alone in his body, and there was a force of darkness within him who continues to seek to spread gloom and doom wherever it can. This story features a lot of restless nights for Bruce as well, and unfortunately, he ends up too late to save Jimmy Olsen. Not Jimmy Olsen, who ends up brutally murdered by Swirly. At least that's what it looks like to me. He's just head down in the toilet and they're like, he's been murdered. Or he was just being mistreated by the other staff at his workplace, but no, he's dead. Death by Swirly. Bruce also is too late to save his friends or Gotham in the end. At least that's what's implied. This one ends pretty bleakly, so yeah. Also, this is back from when we had like Elseworlds, like giant sizes, so there would be like a bunch of short stories in there. Kinda like What If, and I like that style. More stories though than What If, because those are normally 2. Sometimes only 1. Number 5. Infinite Crisis. In the dark multiverse, Ted Kord is not killed by Maxwell Lord. Instead, Ted pretends to agree to join Lord in cleaning house when it comes to his plans for Checkmate. But he betrays Lord and kills him. Brother Eye threatens to push on with the OMAC project, but Kord offers that he could help to guide Brother Eye and take Maxwell Lord's place. Help Brother Eye save and protect the planet as Lord had promised Brother would. Ted ends up attempting to recruit Booster Gold to help him with Brother Eye, but Booster isn't so sure about his friend's plan. In the end, he teams up with Superboy Prime, who has been plotting with Alexander Luthor of Earth 3 to create a perfect world in the main continuity, but Luthor betrays him. Superboy and Blue Beetle, who's now directly connected to the Brother Eye, end up teaming up. They end up attempting to take out 50% of Earth's superhero population as recommended by Brother Eye, but in the end they're forced to eliminate or assimilate all of the superhero populace, who obviously are like, no, you can't just kill us, with Ted Kord sacrificing his humanity in order to completely demolish all of that superhero threat. Number 4. The Murder Machine. After the death of Alfred, Batman in his grief seeks to create an AI in Alfred's image and employs the help of Cyborg. Bruce calls the project the Alfred Protocol. Alfred Protocol is also programmed to act as Bruce's infallible bodyguard, and it's this programming which causes everything to go sideways. The Alfred Protocol spreads, taking out every villain, every criminal he deems a threat to Bruce Wayne's life. However, it doesn't end there. The Alfred Protocol also realizes in order to protect Bruce, it also needs to change him, protect him from himself and his emotions by eradicating them, starting with his fear. This change infects and transforms Batman into a cyborg version of himself known as the Murder Machine, who then goes about killing everyone, determining that everyone and his attachment to them is a weakness. Number 3. The Batman Who Laughs. This dark multiverse story was so terrifying it got its own series. The Batman Who Laughs actually got a miniseries to explain just how his story went down. By now we all should mostly know it, but if you haven't read it, it's chilling and thrilling and it's definitely worth a read. In the story, it's explained how Batman became corrupted by Joker venom when he ended up losing control and killing the Joker, triggered by being forced to watch the Joker kill children's parents in front of them before exposing them to Joker venom and driving them insane. When Batman killed Joker, this exposed him to Joker venom, which was released with the Joker's dying breath from his heart. Batman was then driven insane by the venom, becoming a warped Joker-Batman hybrid, and set out killing everyone, even the members of the Bat family, only allowing Damian Wayne to be converted with the venom and join him. He also later confessed that Alfred was one of the last people to try and stop him by blowing him up, but he managed to thwart and capture Alfred and break him, turning him into his own loyal servant once more. Number 2. The Judas Contract. So as bad as the Judas Contract storyline in the main continuity was for the Teen Titans, apparently its consequences could have been a lot more horrific and a lot worse. In this story, Tara finds herself inspired to become her own murderous villain all her own after one of Dick Grayson's inspirational chats. Great job, Dick. Grayson thinks that he's inspired Tara to become her own person separate from Geoforce's shadow though, not Deathstroke's shadow, as he does not know yet that Tara is actually a spy. She ends up unlocking her potential as a result, becoming more powerful than ever, taking up the name Gaia. She not only tears Slade Wilson apart, literally, but she kills the entire team of Teen Titans, even poor Beast Boy, no! And she also kills the entire Justice League. Number 1. Nightfall. If you haven't read the Tales from the Dark Multiverse, you obviously need to, as they are all pretty crazy, and honestly, the scariest tale can be found in this first one issue. This is a spooky retelling of the Batman story Nightfall. When Bruce has his back broken, he passes the mantle of Batman onto Jean-Paul Valley, aka Azrael. But when he returns, Azrael refuses to give up the mantle. Instead of Bruce Wayne and the Bat family winning it back as they did in the main continuity, this time around Bruce fails. He instead is held captive and tortured for 30 years by Azrael, who rules Gotham with a bloody and merciless iron fist as Saint Batman. Bruce eventually escapes with the help of Bane's son, Torn, and his mother, Lady Shiva. But his time in imprisonment, where he was slowly dissected, has changed Bruce, and no longer is he the man and hero we once knew.